Guys, let's watch this intro video. Scott put a lot of work into this.
Your mic is terrible.
Put it in the middle of your shirt,
Well, I don't want it on.
Matt Data Scott, UNpartygarage. 1, 2, 3. Tough conversations, made easy.
What's that? Want to know how to bake bread? We know how to break bread, make bread.
Brown cow.
You called it episode number 2.
I did. I was seeing if people are paying attention. Are they?
Streaming on Wi-Fi? Which could follow.
All right, brother, you're about to steal my camera in any second.
Oh, I'm gonna turn my ringer off.
Take it. Scott, take the camera.
Boom. What's up?
What is up, Unparty Garage?
What's
Man,
happening?
We appreciate you guys tuning in. We're excited about tonight's show. So here's the deal. We're going to get going, but we need 10 likes and 10 comments, man. So if you're viewing us right now, if your friends aren't viewing us, tell them to view us. Throw us a like, throw us a comment real quick. That helps boost this so that 85% of our friend base can see that we're on and live. Man, we got a good show tonight. We, last week we're still working on some editing. That Amber Alert really jacked us up.
Jacked us.
Did you guys see what happened with that Amber Alert situation?
Elian Gonzalez.
No, true story, man. So the Amber Alert situation seriously, have any of you guys actually seen the official?
No.
So here's what happened. Y'all call bullshit with me. So I looked it up because I was pissed off because I was like, I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to feel guilty for, being upset that an Amber Alert messed up our podcast because what's more important, babies are getting kidnapped or podcasts?
Obviously the podcast.
Clearly podcast, right?
Yeah.
But no, so I looked it up, man. So here's what happened. A chick, Mobile, Alabama. Now here's her story.
Beautiful city.
We'll talk about all the bullshit in the story, but here's her story. She picks up, supposedly, with her infant child in the back seat, picks up a stranger off the side of the road.
Right.
Red flag number 1, right?
No,
so then she takes the stranger, instead of like taking him to wherever he's hitchhiking, she's like, hey, let's go to Burlington Coat Factory and do some shopping again.
Yeah, of course, like you do.
So takes the stranger off the side of the road, supposedly, to Burlington Coat Factory. And then she somehow gets flagged for shoplifting at Burlington Coat Factory. So what do you do when you're getting flagged for shoplifting at Burlington Coat Factory?
You run.
No, you hand your baby and your car keys to the stranger you just picked up.
Oh.
So that's exactly what this lady did. This lady literally gives her child and her keys and says, go wait in the car, I'll get this shoplifted thing figured out. And then comes back and is like, son of a bee sting, my car's not here anymore. Or
Did
my
that
baby.
guy steal her car?
So I don't know, man. Like, so we need to pick this apart. Like, which part of this is BS?
He had 2 strikes.
He had 2 strikes?
He couldn't get like messed up in their little shoplifting.
I think she definitely knew him. There's no way she didn't know there's no, I mean, and crack's a hell of a drug.
Cocaine,
right?
yeah, sure.
But
And you meant that positively, right?
Yeah, I mean, have you ever
Thank
seen
you.
a crackhead with the flu? Never.
Thank you.
Never.
They stay
So
healthy.
crack heals flu. That's the first thing we're going to teach you guys tonight.
Right.
No, man. I mean, like, I can't imagine a parent in their right mind picking up a hitchhiker with an infant, taking the hitchhiker or stranger or whatever he's doing. I don't know if he's hitchhiking. He might just be chilling. But taking them to shopping with her infant, but then much less giving the keys. So it had to be somebody that she knew. So anyways,
I mean, define new. I mean, like, they had spent some quality time together driving from Hitchhike A to Burlington Coat Factory.
I know, but look, I've known you guys for years. I wouldn't give you my car keys and my baby.
That's actually inaccurate.
Well, I can't for you legally because
Yeah, I can't be around.
that's why we have to do this in a garage outside of school zone.
It should be known that he brought it up first.
That's true. The restraining order strictly dictates.
Yes. Yeah, I think I think she must have known him or been a terribly unfit mother.
A terribly unfit mother who shouldn't get her baby back.
Never.
But at the end of the day, she ruined her damn podcast. That's
Yeah.
the more important one.
That's the more important thing.
I would like to send a shout out to Courtney. Hey, Courtney.
Courtney Shea
We
Myrick.
see you, girl.
Yes.
Courtney, you tuned in. What you want us to talk about tonight, girl? Post it.
post it.
We want
Tell us
y'all
what
to
you wanna
dictate.
have.
What's been going on lately, man? I have to bring it up because y'all don't know shit about it. The basketball situation.
LeBron.
Anybody care about it?
LeBron.
People that like basketball, I guess.
Well, I mean, last time we were talking about LeBron, it was I'm going to the
we talked to him, and then we
Cavaliers, I'm
wanted
gonna
to
be
talk about him
awesome.
the next episode, but the next episode was 2 weeks out, and that sweep was just over so quick.
That was way too fast.
That was a quick NBA championship.
Because I thought that the conspiracy theorists said that the NBA is all rigged and there would never be a sweep.
It's the easiest sport to rig, but you can still only rig it so much. It's easy in the NBA to like call a bunch of fouls early in the game to get the star player thrown out so that you can, shave points and stuff, but you can't just completely make a team lose. A lot of people says that the NBA did favor the Cavs the last several games because it makes financial sense for them to try to drag it out more than a sweep.
Right?
Sure.
But now, so LeBron went to the Lakers. I don't know if anybody even cares about this anymore, but the big deal is DeMarcus Cousins, who was injured but played for the Pelicans. He's an all-star, good player, went to the Golden State Warriors, who not only just won 73 games and had an NBA sweep. Like, do they really need a fifth all-star? But then now everybody's going, oh, it takes 5 all-stars to beat LeBron. It's like, no, they had 2 all-stars 4 years ago and they beat LeBron.
Well, here's the question right now. Like, who, and because I really don't know, as you pointed out, who is on the Lakers that are going to support LeBron? Like, do they have anybody at this point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
obviously they're not making it.
They do. They got the point guard that's decent, and they've done some trades.
is his name the point guard?
No, what's his name?
See?
I would have known it if you wouldn't have just said that.
I know.
Man.
Is Shaq still playing?
Shaq plays there.
Yeah.
Shaq, Kobe,
LeVar
Burton.
No, it's not.
Either one.
No, that's a person.
Dickie Ducatomy. That's
Isn't he
the
the guy?
Stars center.
Isn't he the guy that married Kim
really don't care.
Kardashian's
I mean, here's
sister?
the reason I don't keep up with
Reading
NBA.
Rainbow?
No, isn't it Kim Kardashian? Fuck you. Come on, do something.
That's a wasp.
We
No.
did this to stage that we're in a garage.
Yeah.
So good job on that.
I hope people saw that.
I mean, my
That's
big
a wasp.
question is: do people that are as old as we are? I hate to call us old, but let's be honest. Does anybody that was around in the '90s Jordan era, or even the late '80s, Showtime Magic Johnson era, or I know there's people that are Ewing fans and Barkley fans.
Lonzo Ball is his name.
Yes, Lonzo. What
I
did I
just,
say?
Good old Lonzo.
I just
What did you
thought
say?
of it. off the
No,
top
what did
of
I
my head.
say?
You said
I
something.
said Lonzo.
No,
I
you
said
said.
I said something with an L.
You said LeVar, and I went to LeVar Burton, who's the only LeVar
Lonzo
I know.
Ball.
And it's not even
He's-
LeVar. What's that guy's name?
Lamar?
Lamar? I don't think it's Lamar.
You're talking about Lamar Odom.
Trey?
No, I was talking about Burton,
He
Reading
said something
Rainbow.
about Kardashian.
Trayvon?
My point is, does anybody really love the NBA now more than in the '90s?
I think Andrew Boyd does, and he wants
But he didn't watch it in
Lonzo
the '90s. He's too
Boyle.
young. He doesn't get it.
No, he cares.
Does
He cares.
Oh, did he say something?
Yeah, he told me secretly. None of y'all knew. Lonzo Ball was the name.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Nah, man. So I've been bitching and moaning about that. What else has been going on with current events? Lonzo Ball. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Here's what I would say. I think this is kind of a fascinating thing with our little show that, it's just us. We're in the garage. We're talking.
Right.
But we have picked some subjects unintentionally. We were just picking them because it was stuff that we wanted to talk about. That each of these subjects have ended up being very relevant.
Weeks
within
later,
the next,
we're prophesying.
within the
we're
next
literally
couple of weeks.
prophesying the future of our
Yes,
country.
yeah.
We talked about immigration reform when that wasn't a thing.
It wasn't.
And then it became a thing.
Yeah.
It became a thing.
I'm starting to see
Because
how the
we
New
talked about
Testament
it.
works.
And then we talked about abortion. It wasn't a thing.
funny.
Babies started dying.
Prophesy.
Yeah.
Not so much on the abortion.
Sorry, we were talking about how Danny said a totally sacrilegious comment underneath while you were talking, so I
But
apologize.
to your point. And then he said it was funny.
Bring all sacrilegious
It was.
comments to the
Yeah,
forefront.
no, we were
Yeah,
talking about
please.
prophesizing how we would talk about something, then it would come true, and I said I'm starting to see
You
how.
know what? I hope LeBron
I said
and
I'm
the
starting
Lakers-
to see how the New Testament.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
A little sacrilegious tip. I hope LeBron and Lonzo Ball beat the hell out of the Golden State Warriors.
Man.
I was a Golden State fan, but then they added KD. I didn't like him as much. Now they added Cousins. I just don't respect that.
Here's the thing,
I just
though.
want the good old days when you just stayed with a franchise for 30
Here's
years.
the
and
thing:
never got
as
a
long
chance.
as the Bulls can hold on to Pippen and hold on to John
Rodman.
Pippen, Rodman, and you got as long as you'll have Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman there, you're going to be fine.
Name a white guy from the winning season where they did 70 plus games.
John Stockton.
Yes. Wasn't he for the Utah Jazz?
Motherfucker could hit threes.
Well, no, I just wanted to know.
It was
What about
business.
Was John Stockton on that team, or was he on the Jazz?
No, he was on the
John
the
Stockton
Bulls.
was on the Utah Jazz. Are you talking about Steve Kerr? What?
No, I'm talking about, who was the white? John Paxton.
No.
Paxton.
Paxton was the point guard, and then Steve Kerr was also a point guard. For
Yeah.
the Bulls.
None
Yeah,
of y'all
and-
can name a white guy.
I just did,
Those
John
are
Paxton.
both White guys for the
You named
Bulls.
John Stockton, who played for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, well,
And I
he's a
named
white
Hornacek,
guy.
who also
But it was John
played
Paxton who rained down threes
I
for
can
the
go.
Bulls.
Yeah,
I'm just
John
saying.
Paxton and like '92, and then
Yeah.
after that, B.J. Armstrong came
Kerr.
Well,
in. And
Paxton's
Steve Kerr,
still,
I just said that he's the Golden State Warriors coach now.
isn't Paxton
Yeah.
still playing for the
Yeah.
Bulls?
You're 25 years late.
A little bit behind.
I
don't keep up with it. I don't watch as much as I
Basketball's
like to.
clearly our strong subject, but maybe we
Really
should move
is.
on from that. What
Yeah.
else has been going on, man?
The American Revolution happened not too long ago. I mean, as the crow flies, what's it?
200,
200 some odd years?
plus 30,
Coming up on our
plus
country's
40.
birthday.
Holy crap! How many pluses do we get?
Is Danny trying to do that segment of the show that we joked about, and we were like, you know what we need to do? A current events with someone that has memory loss issues.
Hey.
Just starts naming random. So next thing you know, he's going to be in the wrong country.
Yeah.
Like, dude, tear down the wall.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it'll come down as long as Reagan keeps pushing.
I'll tell you.
Gorbachev is not going to stand his ground. He can't. I mean,
Do y'all love Reagan as much as everybody else?
look, here's the thing.
Voodoo economics.
It's
Reagan.
trickle
like
down
'em?
Yeah.
economics.
Both of y'all are Reagan fans?
No, here's the thing. We were fucking kids when Reagan was president. And
You were a kid. I was changing.
graduating
diapers.
college.
Duh.
I get it. But here's the thing. I think Reagan was a great president. He didn't take any bullshit from people. But I also think people get caught up in this mythos that is the Reagan era. And
Making him
people-
bigger than he was.
Exactly. I think it's going to happen.
No.
30 years from now, people are going to look back and go, remember when Trump was president and shit got done?
Here's the deal.
People
Here's
are
the
going to be
deal.
able to.
Reagan was one of. Was he? Who was after Reagan?
Well, who did Reagan
Was
run
that
off?
for
Who did Reagan
first
run?
Bush?
Yeah,
Okay,
Bush
yeah.
Senior.
Yeah, because Bush Senior was Reagan's vice president. Do you know who Reagan beat to become president?
Not Carter.
Mondale.
Yes, but watch this. Here's my opinion. Here's why I think people are able to fantasize about the Reagan presidents. It's because 1991 was when George Bush Sr. first invaded Iraq, which is at the point where CNN for the first time became a 24-hour news network.
Yeah, but they got it through forgery and debauchery. That's the
What?
only reason. CNN was going fucking broke until that war came out, and then
That's when they started doing the 24/7.
they started doing 24/7. But these motherfuckers were making up shit from their hotel rooms. They were casting shit from
I
their
didn't
hotel
say,
rooms
I
with
didn't
a
say
green.
it was good or bad.
No, it
I'm
was
just
fucking
saying-
horrible. They were acting like attacks were happening all around them, and they were in their
Sure.
hotel room in California.
Yeah.
In California, they weren't even in the Middle
And we
East.
really didn't land on the moon either. But
I
my
kind of
point,
blame Reagan for the.
This is
I just think the
documented,
drug
yeah.
war has been a dismal failure, and he's kind of the advocate for that. So that's why I mean.
no, Nancy Reagan was all about don't do drugs. Don't
That's what I'm
say
saying.
Ronnie was.
Hey, I
for
think we
drugs.
all had to
I
go
said
to
he
those
was for
dare
the
classes.
drug war.
But
the
here's
drug
the-
war that's been a dismal failure.
Let me rein it back in from the rabbit holes that all created. I believe that Reagan was the last president that we had that was not under 24-hour talking head scrutiny. It was.
Okay, we're about to go down that road.
Okay,
Scott.
but let me say this. Let me say this because pre-Reagan, and I was only alive for Reagan, Carter, and then I was alive during Ford, but I don't remember anything because I was a fetus. But the reality is, my cartoons were ruined. My Friday night with Dukes of Hazzard was ruined when the president was going to say something because every channel all stopped and all four channels were playing the presidential.
He's on every channel.
I know, you can talk about the
Jeff
comedians.
Foxworthy.
That's
Exactly
exactly
what it
right.
is.
But that was my childhood growing up. Was oh crap, the president's on.
Yeah, he
but
missed
it
Flipper.
yeah, but it wasn't.
We're gonna miss Flipper.
Yeah.
The president's on.
Yeah.
One of the greatest comedy
but
skits.
I'll-
ever.
But that's the thing. I think before Reagan, it was
flashlights in the.
They
you
could
know,
do
late at
whatever the
night,
hell they
Watergate.
wanted.
Yeah, Watergate.
We got a massive addresses only. We didn't
I
have
don't
all
know that I'd agree with that. How can you say that George Bush Sr. in the late 80s, early 90s, what was it? When did he become president? 1990? Exactly?
Carter was 7.
Reagan was
Reagan was
80s.
80. Reagan was 80.
80?
Yeah.
And he did 2 terms? So
Yes,
80
he
to
did.
88?
Yeah.
So 88 to what, 92? Well, and it was senior.
Senior was to 92.
So in 88 to 92, he wasn't under the same type of scrutiny that presidents are now as far as...
Are you talking about Bush Senior?
I'm talking about, you said that Reagan was the last president that they weren't as transparent, and I don't agree with that.
I think Gulf War was the beginning.
You're just saying when CNN first went 24/7 on the
Yes.
news.
They were saying they weren't scrutinized.
So let's talk about this. You know, since we're down a rabbit hole, I particularly strongly agree with Scott on most things, and I significantly disagree with Scott on him saying we need less transparency in government. I vote for way more transparency, and so that's kind of the subject you're bringing up.
You're bringing that into that.
Let's bring
Because
it
I'll
up.
come to that.
No, yeah, bring it. Come on.
Well,
I want to
I mean,
hear. I want to
here's-
hear where your logical premise is on this.
Here's what I think. I think that the job of the president is to represent the best interests of our nation, both internally and externally as far as foreign affairs. I think that there are things that if you talk about what's happening with our economy, and if the American people all knew how volatile the dollar was on a daily basis, and we are getting access to that information, I think it can cripple people, and we'll react out of fear of something's going to happen. We need to be manipulated
All right,
about
but here's
that.
my problem. The private sector, okay, so last time we talked, you brought this up and you said, well, think about it this way. Sometimes your boss does things, and sometimes when said boss does things, he doesn't announce to the whole company what he's doing because you just got to trust that he's working for your best interest. And you related that to government, and you said government should have the same opportunity to be unanswerable. They can just, you know, kind of do and say whatever, not have to be as transparent. Here's my problem with that. The private sector is naturally governed by a free market exchange. The private sector is, if you have a monopoly, you're getting government regulated, so you can't do that. And then at the same time, if you're not good at what you do, then you're going to go out of business because competition is going to put you out of business. So there's a natural law that actually, in my opinion, holds private sector accountable. There's not a natural law that holds government accountable. What holds government accountable is the people. So the government, in my opinion, should have to be openly crazy transparent so that we can keep them. Because like I said last time, I don't think the government gets together and drinks horse's blood and puts on cloaks and conspires to take over the world.
I hope they do.
I think it's a natural, no, I think it's a natural system of power that creates money. And there's a lot of money in politics. We all agree on that, right? And so I think they need to be more transparent because they need to be answerable to the people because there's not a natural system that's going to do that for us.
And
like
your
in the
argument-
private sector.
like in the
Like if
private
you look at the DMV, or you look at almost anything government, they do such a poor job because they don't have to answer to, well, if we do a crappy job, people will just go to our competition down the street. That's why government doesn't work as well as the private sector. So to say that government should not be answerable, I have a huge problem with that personally.
And let me say this about that, because I love to say, let me say this about that in general. Saying that they're not answerable is not the same thing as saying that it is part of the government's job, in my opinion, to manipulate the information that is going to the American people. I know that sounds terrible when you say that.
I disagree.
But let me say this.
Okay.
It is, you know, we've seen movie after movie about this. You know, there's a asteroid coming to the world. You know, there's a point at which time that it's going to be beneficial to share that information, and there's a point when it would cause more panic and harm to share that same bit of information. So I feel like you can always look at the subject matter and decide that yes, this is a good time to bring this up to the American people, and this is a bad time. You know, we always talk about the war example. You wouldn't want to get on the news and say, hey, psst, America, tomorrow we're going to invade, you know, Afghanistan. don't tell anybody, this is what we're going to do. But in an effort of being fully fair and letting you know all the information, tomorrow we're going to do that. That's the easy one for us to say, hey, of course we don't need our military secrets out there. But I think the same thing applies to issues that are above our pay grade, that are issues that are about controlling the emotion of the American people.
But that creates a situation where the government has more opportunity to do terrible things like they've done in the past. Like our government has been guilty of doing these things. If you look at Kennedy, who's a damn celebrity in our world, and I like Kennedy because right before he's assassinated, he wanted to speak up about the Federal Reserve. So I got good things to say about Kennedy for the most part. But you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. First of all, he made it sound like we were in an arms race with the Soviet Union, right? Or with Russia, right? They had 1,600 nukes to our 18,000. We weren't in a race for shit. We were killing them. And we put military over in Turkey and pointed nukes at Russia. But then what the American people heard was Russia put nukes in Cuba and they're pointing them at us and we're in an arms race with them. And we started that.
We started because we wouldn't back down on putting those missiles in Turkey. And had we not have put them so fucking close, the Bay of Pigs, the missile crisis would never fucking happen.
Exactly. So we started that. Our government should be answered. We don't have to
I agree with what you're saying, but I would also say you made probably an invalid point to begin with. You said the free market corrects itself.
To some extent, yeah.
To some extent. I would say, you would say,
I didn't say that. I said the free market is answerable to a condition that keeps it in check to some extent. Government keeps it in check from monopolies, and competition keeps it in check from just being terrible to its customers.
All right, so I would argue,
they can go down the road.
I would argue, and I think you would probably agree, that these government taking this money from these corporations is to put these big corporations in a situation where they can outstand any competition that comes to them.
That's corporatism.
Which isn't capitalism. But in a beautiful, completely capitalistic society, I agree with you 100%. But we don't have that.
Right, but okay, that's
and we're nowhere near that.
That's because government is not as answerable as they should be.
That's true.
In my opinion, if government was more answerable about where all their money came from, and that was not something that was hard to figure out, they just, like we said, right, you wear it like a NASCAR jacket. Wear the oil companies and the central banks and put all that shit on your jacket so we know who gave you the cash to get into office.
Yeah.
I think that is a perfect example why government should be answerable and why they should be transparent.
Soft money.
I agree that on the FBI situation or the war situation, the government shouldn't have to go on live stream, Facebook, have their own podcast, wouldn't be as cool as ours. I agree that they shouldn't do that.
It might be.
They'd have more viewers, but they'd buy.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
let's
in that scenario.
Let's segue this because.
So you agree with me? We're going to move on. All right, cool.
Yeah, some of our fans were talking about minimum wage. So, and this kind of dovetails right in on that. This is the government trying to regulate capitalism, and what are the consequences of that?
How do y'all feel as far as Andrew? So look, we'll go to the comment box. So Andrew Boyd says, what are y'all thoughts on $15 minimum wage for fast food workers?
I think it's fucking stupid.
Jackie Sullivan says, I say raise minimum wage is a good idea. More poverty comes from trying to keep up. Even working on week 40 is nothing. What if that spikes food prices, was what Andrew says.
Scott said, fat guy Scott is hot.
No, I skipped that on purpose.
I know.
So you got Andrew saying, what do you guys think about this? He said that could spike food prices. There's some truth there. Jackie says it's probably a good thing. I'd like to hear what y'all have to say. I've actually been really torn on this argument. So I want to be, and one of our goals, I just want to say this. I know we didn't do as much of an intro because we've done a few episodes and most of you guys have seen us before. UNpartygarage, we just try to put our religious affiliations down, any political party affiliations down, and just kind of shoot from the hip and just talk things out like gentlemen. So we're happy to address anything and everything for the people. There's no biased opinions. There's no establishment behind us. So if I'm being completely honest, and I don't know if this makes me look as together as a political guy, I'm so torn on this. I really am. Because I see what Andrew's saying, well, minimum wage goes up, that's just going to inflate the dollar. Food prices go up. Maybe they try to replace people with AI. At the same time, there has become a bigger and bigger wealth gap. There's more and more super rich people, but the poverty level seems to continue to increase. Poverty level is pretty low right now.
Well, the poverty level increases because people keep having babies and that can't afford them. And so those numbers keep going up. And so just more and more people go into poverty.
How do you feel about the minimum wage, though?
I think that a capitalistic society, that number fixes itself. I don't think the government should come in and say, you have to pay this much money.
You think people should just be paid what they're valued by from the business?
Exactly.
And if the business can find people
if
at a low enough rate, then it's the business's choice.
Servers to this day get paid $2.13 an hour. And society says, well, they'll make the rest of their money in tips. And they're okay with that. But somebody working at Sonic for, $7 an hour, look at Chick-fil-A, okay?
So,
hang on.
Okay.
Look at Chick-fil-A, where Burger King starts their people at $8 an hour, and you get some of the shittiest people that ever, put on an apron, flipping your burger.
That works
hey,
at Burger
no offense
King.
if your mama works at Burger King, and in a job that should be held by a 16-year-old, not a 45-year-old.
She could be a manager.
Sure could be. But Chick-fil-A starts their people out at $11 an hour. And there's a stark difference when you walk into a Chick-fil-A versus when you walk into. They start at 11.
I thought they just raised it recently.
They may have, but I talked to a girl who worked. I talked to a girl who worked at Chick-fil-A about 6 weeks ago, and she said they start at 11, whereas Arby's starts at 10. Now there's a stark difference, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me. There's a stark difference between the kind of service you get when you walk into a Chick-fil-A and the kind of service you get when you walk into your average Burger King or Hardee's or something like that.
But
now, why is that?
So let me say this. I'm a diehard capitalist, right? I lean left, and the one reason I don't go all the way left is because that's the one thing is I'm a fiscal conservative to some extent. I believe in welfare programs more than most libertarians, but I think they should be temporary most of the time unless you're legitimately handicapped or something like that. But here's one thing I'll give you. What about, Enron, right? You remember Enron?
Yeah.
Enron owned majority of California's power grid.
Okay.
It was not government run, it was a private sector. Enron forced blackouts across California to create cash. Okay?
Sure.
That's a situation where I say, yes, government should step in and have some regulation.
Some regulatory.
So as someone that is a capitalist, I do believe in some small government regulatory, as long as the government is transparent about it. Because
should Enron have been able to buy as much grid as they did? Should utilities be in the hands of the private sector? Should the government pay for utilities? Or not pay for utilities, but run utilities, so that you don't have shit like that.
I don't think the government should run anything, honestly, other than maybe our military and building roads. I think the government should provide checks and balances.
Let's come back to this question.
How much power do you give the government?
Well, you haven't weighed in. I want to hear what you have to say about the $15 minimum wage.
That's what I'm saying. I want to go back down to the core issue.
Okay.
Because I don't know the answer to this question.
You put minimum wage at $15 an hour. Yeah.
Where did minimum wage come from? Because my theory, which is uneducated, is that minimum wage was put in place so that if somebody was asking you to do a job, there was a standard that said you can't just get somebody desperate and pay them $1.
I could be wrong.
Please.
From what I understand, minimum wage really came out of the 20s and 30s, back when they had huge sweatshops.
Okay.
Where people were working full, 14, 15, 16-hour days for, 20 cents an hour or something like that. It was almost slave labor, and they had kids and all that shit working there with them. That's where it spawned from, so that you couldn't take advantage of a poor populace.
But
as cities grew outward and jobs, once we got out of the Great Depression and jobs started to go again, and we hit our really big industrial boom, it really took care of itself in terms of those jobs just started popping up. People had options at that point. You know, you didn't see signs that said no transits pop up anymore. There was, employable work where they had, they needed people. And so when they needed people, then it became all that stuff kind of fell by the side, but the minimum wage had already been instituted and kept raising up per annum.
But how did they determine what that amount was going to be?
Well, some fucking economist somewhere sat down and figured it out. I don't know what to tell you on that. I don't have the algorithm in front of me.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But minimum wage in its infancy was set up to be for a minimum wage. Jobs that didn't, you're an engineer, you're not going to work at McDonald's. This job was set up for a certain demographic. What's happened is that demographic has just been blown out of proportion by people who said, I'm going to start at Taco Bell and I'm going to stay at Taco Bell and this is going to be my job for the rest of my life. And now where the average worker used to be 16, 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, now the average worker at these fast food restaurants are in their 30s. And these minimum wages that were set up were never set up for somebody to run a family off of. But because they work there,
should minimum wage keep up with inflation?
No, it's set. To a certain extent, but these jobs are set up for for high school kids and shit like that. They're not made for somebody to earn their living and retire. You're not supposed to retire from Taco Bell as the drive-through guy.
I actually support higher minimum wage until I get crappy service.
Well, the problem with that is. You raise the minimum wage, you're going to have to $15 an hour, you're going to have teachers quitting their job because they can make more money working at McDonald's than they can teaching your children how to speak. Of course we don't. We also don't pay our paramedics $15 an hour. And paramedics, the people that drive up to save your fucking life when you're having a heart attack.
But that would go up if minimum wage was raised to 15.
Well, then if everybody just takes it, then there's no sense. It doesn't make sense to do it.
Jacqueline says, and this is the mentality I would imagine of most servers, that, she says she works hard for her money that she gets paid from the company, but her customers make up the gap between what she's get paid.
Well, I will say this, and this reminds me of that Reservoir Dogs conversation. But I love that you can make a decent wage as a server.
Right.
But that's mostly the generosity of your people. Now, I guess it's just maybe more expected, but I love that. I love that there's a job out there that you can go get. I know Jackie, so she's not a single mom, but if Jackie was a single mom,
right,
she could go get, a job as a server and possibly support a family. I'm with you.
Well, first off, that only depends on.
Well, look, let's play the other side. Because
that only depends on where Jackie, the luck that she gets at the restaurant she gets hired at. Longhorn. Okay, so you're going to get a certain demographic at Longhorn, and your tips are going to be. She's never going to get on average.
If she's paid off as a server, she's paid on how good she performs. So it's a little bit different than
minimum wage. Not really.
No. Maybe to some extent, no. But what I'm saying is actually in support of what you're saying, Danny, because minimum wage is you're required to be paid this matter if you provide that kind of value or not. As a server, you're getting paid $800 a week or whatever you're getting paid because you're providing enough value that you deserve that money. Because if you're a crappy server, have either one of you guys ever given a less tip because you had a crappy server?
Hell yeah.
Have you ever given a better tip because of a better server?
You know what? Here's the thing.
I've given a 100% tip because I had flawless, impeccable service.
Then you are truly the exception. Because someone who says, "Man, I got great service," what's 15%?
You think most
that's what people think. Most people in their head, regardless of what it is or isn't, think 15 to 20%. That's the max they're going to get.
We're showing Jackie some love. Let's show Andrew some love. Here's what he says. My friend Tyler is a manager.
Did she say true to what?
Hold on. Let me say what Andrew said. My friend Tyler is a manager at Wendy's in New York State. They have more pressure to cut hours and run shifts thin, and food prices have immediately gone up following the steady increase. Just to inform on how New York State is regulating it, they have to be at $15 an hour by 2020, and it's currently at $10 an hour. So that a $10 an hour minimum wage, which is a high minimum wage, we're at like 7 something here in Alabama, and they have to be at $15 an hour by 2020. So his point is, his friend Tyler's a manager. So what are they doing to balance the minimum wage at Wendy's? food prices are going up. They're cutting hours of their employees and they're running shifts thinner. So
and
essentially
eventually
less service
and
more
eventually,
expensive food.
and eventually they're going to do the other way that McDonald's goes and just automate that. And guess what? The computer they put at the front of that line isn't going to give you an attitude when you ask for extra cheese.
Yeah.
You know. Have you seen what they're doing? And to Jackie's point, demographic does matter. You're absolutely right, Jackie. I waited tables for years, and I know that you can work at a shitty restaurant and not make shit on the reg. You have to get a good restaurant.
Depends on where you're at.
Just depends
But
on the
isn't
restaurant that hires you.
But aren't the people at
It depends on the
Perry's-
restaurant that hires you.
But aren't the people at Perry's Steakhouse people that have been really good servers starting off at the shitty restaurants and they've moved their way up?
I think when you say move their way up, you make it sound like they're working towards a goal. These people are trying to get a job wherever they can get a job. And so you may not be fortunate. Macaroni Grill may not be hiring this month.
Okay,
So you may have to take a job at Lone Star
But Perry's
where you don't make as much
Steakhouse
money.
And Fleming's and Roost Chris, they're not
Yeah,
just
only
hiring
have so
whoever the hell
no,
off
they're
the
not.
street.
You got to be the creme de la creme
All right, that's what
to
I'm
get
saying.
that
So
job.
you
Now,
said
how
that, so
many
you have to move
servers?
up.
How many servers? And then you've got a very
That's
small
every
number.
job industry. I mean, look at how many people go to college
No,
right now and get a business
no.
degree or a
Yeah,
marketing degree.
but-
There's not jobs
Okay,
available.
yeah, but every restaurant that you pass on the street is not a Ruth Chris or a fucking Perry's
Still
Steakhouse.
talking over things.
It's the one. Okay, I apologize. Every job, every restaurant job that you pass, you would have to argue that the overwhelming amount of restaurants are not the Ruth Chris's and not the Perry's. It's a very small piece of that pie, right?
What do you, yeah.
All right, so most people have to make do with what's left in that, with the big common denominator of that pie, which is your
Most
fucking
people
Lone
have to be
Stars.
servers. They choose to. It's just it depends on the market demand.
Okay.
Well,
I would say you're
let's-
wrong.
Let's back it up because we're talking about servers and we're talking about.
When I waited tables, I worked with people that had 3 degrees. They couldn't get a job in
Andrew
their
wants to
field.
clarify. He's not talking about grocery store employees. He's not talking about gas station operators. He's talking specifically fast food workers. Should fast food workers get a guaranteed $15 an hour minimum wage? I struggle with government mandates on pay. At the same time, I do think that the reason I'm open to it is because over the last 30 or 40 years, poor has gotten poorer, rich has gotten richer, and the minimum class has been smashed a little bit more.
Well,
I don't know. I
but
struggle
here's-
with it.
here's
As a
the thing.
libertarian, I struggle with it, or someone that
I
identifies.
say let them get the $15 an hour.
But
with
here's
it?
the thing.
And because I think that
I
eventually.
thought you said no at first. Did you
No,
just
no,
get
here,
swung by
no, no,
yourself?
no. Here's what I think. I think they should make $15 an hour. If you're working in the fast food industry, that way I won't have to look at you in 3 to 4 years. Because you're going to price yourself out of the market, and these companies are going to put computers in your place, and I'd much rather talk to them than talk to you. So keep fighting for that 15.
Because here's the real thing is, why is there a minimum wage? What is the amount supposed to be, and what is that based on? And then there should be a minimum standard that a company can't just hire you and say, hey, I want you to do task A, B, and C, and I'm going to pay you $1.
Let me
Well,
back
Matt
up.
says
Let me
you
back
don't have to worry
up.
about
Let's
that.
not
You
worry
just
about.
work
Let's
your
not
way
worry
up
about the
to the better
financial figure of
restaurant.
minimum wage. The big question is this: should you be able to work 40 hours a week at minimum wage and live a non-poverty lifestyle? That's the big question. Should you be able to take the bare minimum that people are required to pay you and raise a family off?
No.
Because that's the ultimate question. That's what the whole $15 an hour is about,
Why
right?
do you say no?
Because that's not what that job's set up for.
You think
Well-
that job's an entry-level job? It's for teenagers
Yes.
and retirees
Yeah.
that can only make so much a year.
Well,
to
and
get themselves-
15
Now, if you're Bruce Donaldson, sure. You know, you can take that $10 an hour and you can make it, you can stretch it because, you know, your bills are a total
You're
of
growing your own crops
$400.
inside your RV or whatever.
Exactly. You know, but to raise a family, to make $8, $9 an hour and think, man, all right, it's time to start a family.
Yeah.
You have no idea of what economics, you know, really means.
So what about the
something you
person
need
that
to-
makes a mistake in high school and gets pregnant at 17, 18 years old and they're not qualified for another job?
I mean,
Now
you're
you're
right.
bringing
It
up
almost
last week.
it almost sucks that people have to take responsibility for their actions. You're right about that. I don't know about that person.
No, but
Maybe she should have got an abortion.
hey,
I'll just say, you want to go back down that road? All right, I think we've unpacked this plenty. We can come back to that another episode, another week. I don't know, man. I'm kind of in the middle. I would give it a shot because I do think that we have a true poverty problem. I don't know that it needs to be 15, but I do think that My big thing is on macroeconomics level. There's a part of me that says that we're just going to inflate the dollar by raising the minimum wage, and so the cost of living is going to go up an equal amount, and it's not really $15 an hour is not going to be that different than $8 an hour. That's my only struggle with it. But if it worked, or if we could find out if it works, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, but
there are
what would happen to
places
people
doing
in
it.
our job? We're 100%
That's what I'm saying.
commission.
I'd assume everybody's money would just go
No,
up,
we're
and the
100%
dollar would just be worth less.
Which just hurts us across the world.
Y'all throw us something else to talk about. We're going to get to the Founding Fathers here in a little bit, July 4th Eve. But before we get to that, man, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, all this stuff that's going on with immigration. What?
Did you see what Jackie responded?
What'd she say?
Bruce Donaldson is watching now.
Hey, Bruce. Look, Jackie said it took me years to get into Longhorn.
You put Bruce Donaldson, Danny Davis is talking about.
Yeah.
And then now Bruce is in.
But you see it? Jackie said it took her years to get into Longhorn.
Most times a second job.
Well, Jackie, Matt just thinks you're not working hard enough
You don't
to
have
get
to
into that
talk
steak
like that.
Perry's.
No, that's
Getting the steak Perry's.
she was
You
agreeing
just need to
with
go to
me
Ruth's
because
Chris.
she
You
worked.
just need to go to Ruth's
She
Chris,
worked to
Jackie.
move up, man. She was agreeing with me. Where did you work at? Copeland's?
I worked at Copeland's. I worked
Okay,
at
did you
Macaroni
start
Grill.
there?
I worked at No.
Where'd you start?
Sonic was
So
my
you
first
moved
job.
up, man.
No, I made the same amount at Sonic as I did at
But you
Apple.
got paid more off tips at Copeland's and Macaroni.
I know Sonic. They had me wearing those skates.
No, you did.
And-
Shut up.
Now, I'm gonna tell you something. People don't tip at Sonic anymore.
If
People
anybody
don't tip
knows
those
Danny,
car hops.
Just take everything he says, put it in an 8-ball, shake it up, and
Look,
you might be getting.
Do y'all remember that people used to tip at Sonic? And
You don't
that
tip at Sonic anymore?
no, nobody tips because everybody they
What
got
do you
those.
mean nobody tips? I
they-
tip every time I go to Sonic.
Yeah, but you must pay in cash because everybody I know. I got the
I pay
credit
with
card.
a card and I keep a couple dollars.
Oh well, who does that? Who keeps cash?
Keep a little bit of cash in the.
I put my
it's in the
card slip
console.
in, and then that's it. It's paid
You're
for.
the guy that intentionally goes to Sonic without cash. You hide your cash at your house when you go, so you can be like, "Oh, it's my first time using Sonic ever in 2018. I didn't know you guys don't take tips on cards."
You know what? No, I just look at the car hop and tell him Matt Bailey says step it up.
Hey guys, here's a nickel. If you work harder, you'll get a Roost Chris one day.
Hey.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm
I'm
saying.
throwing nickels at him as they're skating away.
That's
Ruth Chris
true.
is calling your name, bitch.
I'm making it rain hail. Nickels and pennies. You're a jerk, man. I hope I'm never going to Sonic with you.
I'm never going out to eat at a fast food restaurant with you. I tell you that right now.
Oh, that was a good one. What else you guys got for us, man? You see, we're just knocking them down tonight. So, I mean, keep throwing us some stuff. What do y'all think, honestly, about the whole immigration thing? I know we've already talked about this on a large scale. I'm talking about the whole Trump immigration situation.
Captain did. I think that's Captain D.
I still tip there, too. Thank you.
Captain D's was my first.
Thank you, Jackie.
Have been
I
management,
still tip at
but
Sonic
make
too.
more doing what I do.
Danny's
Yeah.
ruthless.
Jackie, I got you back.
Oh.
Danny, what do you think about this whole immigration situation with Trump?
What about the whole? When you talking about where he is applying
thought-
the rule of law?
I thought he did great, actually.
Hey, Scott. No, will you fill this up with ice?
Yes.
Crushed ice.
Do you need
Thank
to
you.
do a drink?
We grab from the bottom. No, don't do that, please. No, I don't need a new drink. I got a drink.
So I actually, I've railed Trump a few times, right? When we talked about the
What I
omnibus
heard.
bill, not in that way. I would though. I hear he
He
pays
said
great. I hear he pays great. What's Stormy? What's
Don't
her
let the
name?
cat out, Scott.
Who was the dude?
Stormy?
Don't let the cat in here. He scratches up my pool table.
Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, the porn star that got. She was like pissed that he wanted to pay her. What was that about?
Yeah, I know, right?
Apparently Melania Trump needs to give her some lessons.
Yeah.
No, man, I'm an independent. I'm right in the middle. I'm not really a left or a right. So I'm hard on Trump when he's a jerk and he's a doofus. And then I like Trump sometimes on his policies every once in a while. I hate to say that, admittedly, but I'm a little bit in the middle. I actually thought Jeff Sessions was the villain of the whole thing.
Right.
And he's quoting Romans like a jerk, and then
Oh yeah, I saw that.
trying to like separation church and state. Everybody doesn't share your religion, so stop using that to beat people over the head with the Bible. You're not making people want to read the Bible more by doing that in the first place. I thought he was the bad guy, man. I actually thought Trump was going to get some credibility because I thought when Trump came out and said, you know what, I'm going to do an executive order to ban separating kids
Yeah.
from their parents, I thought that was going to earn him some credibility. I actually have to take up for him and say I don't think the Dems gave him enough credit.
Well, no, because they wanted to hate on him to begin with.
It's the first time I felt like he was trying to bring people together.
Yeah.
And trying to see the other side's point of view personally.
And thanks for filling that cup all the way up with ice, Scott. I appreciate that. That's going to go a real far way the way you did it. Just half of it, not even that.
Give me the cat.
Jesus. Hey, while you're taking that back, can you fill that cup up with ice?
No.
It's pretty full, man.
Yeah. If your glass is
Becky
a quarter
says
of the
hi,
way.
Sparrow. Sparrow says hi, Becky.
I can't believe that's the kind of ice you put in there. Fill it all the way up to the top, please.
You are the most demanding.
I swear to God. We're in a hot-ass garage.
Danny gets on Facebook Live for 30 minutes and he thinks he is a prima donna that just start. Can I get some ice water here, brother? You don't even tip at Sonic. And you're like, I'm just bringing some damn ice water.
Hey, look, they don't get. I'm trying to get the minimum wage lowered.
Lower.
Yeah. So these bitches will get a real
I
job.
want this shit down to 50 cents an hour. I want nets outside of our buildings for people trying to kill themselves.
Jump, look, which was just a complete lie.
Was that not?
It was
None of
complete
that was true.
fake as hell.
It was.
And Bill
I
Maher,
know the,
Maher
videos.
had the guy on and who like
that supposedly killed himself?
2 months before who had broke that story, and then it came out that it was all fraudulent.
That's funny.
Becky Pierce says, "Hi, Sparrow."
Yeah, I just acknowledged that a few minutes ago.
Jackie says she still tips at Sonic.
Yeah, thank you. Most of us do, Jackie. He's the minority.
I want to smack the shit out of him for putting his dirty ass fucking hand all where I got to put my fucking mouth.
Oh, now he went overboard.
I don't want
I bet
it
he
now.
doesn't tip you a damn thing.
He won't.
Yeah, I don't want it.
Bro, just knock the top of the ice off his
No, it's not. He was sitting there holding I put my mouth in, and he was just hands in it. All right
I'll
there.
give you
Rim.
a cup of ice.
Dude.
You don't want, I'll get you another cup.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, man. Just
Scott, we kind of just want you
You
back on the
didn't
show,
like
to be
our
honest
show.
with you.
Yeah.
You know what? Scott's off the show. He's our new server. Get me some.
I'm not tipping.
Go get me some meatloaf right now, damn it.
Mom! The
I
meatloaf!
want fancy sauce on
Look,
top
can
of
I
that
tell you
shit.
this? Look, I was at a restaurant, no shit, Sunday, and the server came up. Jackie, you'll appreciate this. I don't know why I'm talking to the phone when I talk to you, Jackie. Jackie, you'll appreciate this. The server comes, and he's going to grab my, and I don't use a straw. I just don't. And so he goes to grab my glass or a refill, palms it. Just fucking like.
Hey, that's
puts
Bush League, though. That's Bush
That's
League.
Bush League. I'm like, dude, grab from the
Server's
bottom. And so when Scott come out, he had his whole hand was around where I put my mouth.
Scott's not a trained server.
I know. Well, I actually had to correct the server. I was like, hey, man.
I feel like they should get $15 an hour, but every time they make mistakes like that, you should be able to, cut them for
Well,
that.
I mean, that's what they say tipping stands for, to ensure promptness. And the word, here's what I think people should do. You talk about tipping. Jackie, tell me where you're at on this. I think people should say what they're going to tip up front.
Yeah. But you don't know.
Yeah, no.
Look,
I
here's
think
my thing.
If you sit down.
If you're terrible,
I love
if you're terrible, I'm going 15%. If you're good, I'm gonna go 35%.
Well, here's what I
So
think.
that's typically my range.
Well, here's what
I've
I
never done a 0 tip. I've done 100% tip. I'm not bragging, but I mean, literally, there's been times where it was on my heart. I was like, I want to bless this person. They're killing
Yeah,
it.
but you ate at Sonic when you did that. Hey, that
I
burger's
didn't tip
$5.
100% at Sonic.
Here's another $5.
No,
It's
you're
on my
mixing
heart.
stuff up. You need to go work for CNN, man. You need to go work for some
Fake news.
some news station.
Scott, what do you think?
I'm going
Should
to check
people
our audio real quick. Y'all keep talking.
should people tip? Should people tell people what they're going to tip before?
No.
Yeah, you got to see if they do a good job or not.
Okay, so if you know that somebody comes in and they tip $2, no matter what they get, is it
Yeah,
fair?
you should. I think you. Okay, I'll say this. You should have to ID yourself when you get there, and just like pedophiles have to have on their ID that
Yeah.
they're sex offenders, it should say "I'm a cheap bastard."
Yeah.
If you're the $2 tipper,
Yeah.
you should be able to be ID'd, and people could go, "You're a cheap ass."
I have a buddy of mine who does not believe in tipping. He doesn't
Like
believe in
Steve Buscemi from Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, I know. Get very similar, but he doesn't believe in tipping, and we're all eating, and I mean, we have this argument.
I'm embarrassed to eat with people like that.
Yeah, we have. So I am too. So we have this argument about it. So we go to Macaroni Grill, right? This girl comes up. She's like, "Hey," we'll say her name was Stephanie. I can't remember. "I'm Stephanie. I'll be taking care of you today." And I'm like, "Stephanie, it's great to meet you." I said, "My name's Danny." I said, "I just want you to let you know, my buddy Jason here does not believe in tipping."
Good for you.
And she laughed. I was like, Stephanie, I'm not kidding. I was like, you can run your ass off for this guy?
I had a
He's
buddy
not
that
going to
didn't tip.
leave
Now,
you
let me
a
ask you
dime.
this.
Hang on, let me finish. I was like, he's not going to leave you a dime. And his face just went super fucking red.
Good.
And she looked at him. She was like, are you serious? You don't believe in tipping? He was like, well, I mean, y'all make so much money. She was like, you know what? Thanks for letting me know up front.
Yeah.
And you know, she
does
brought
his
over, she didn't even run his food. She knew dude never got a refill. You know, she tipped us, she kept us
Good.
going and stuff like that. His food was late.
Crapped on him.
You know, yeah. His food was run by.
I got a buddy that used to not tip also, and he didn't tip sometimes. And he was, this is when we were in college, so I mean, he wasn't wealthy, but my point is, if you can't tip, you don't go to dinner where you tip, right?
Yes.
And he would say, dude, I think if I called the owner and said, I want to pay you for your food, but I don't want to pay for any service,
That's
that
what the
owner would
drive-throughs
say,
are.
just come on in, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, no, man, you budget that in. That's like, if you don't drink and drive, which I personally don't, you go ahead and budget in an Uber, right? Or a taxi cab when you go out, right? Same thing with restaurants. You go to a restaurant, you go ahead and, Scott Ross has joined. Thanks for the like, Scott Ross. You're supposed to be on the damn podcast. I'm with you on the tipping, man.
Yeah, I can't stand a cheap fucker.
Especially when people don't tip at Sonic.
All right, that's different. With the
All right,
advent
I'll
of
bring
the
it this.
debit
What
card,
about Chinese restaurants?
I tip at those.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Like a buffet?
Hell yeah, I'll
They fill your
tip.
water 3 times, you're still tipping.
Yeah, I'm still tipping. You know,
So
and
just
I tip
Sonic?
well. You know, I tip well at a buffet. It's
What
just-
if somebody's at Sonic and they're shuffle skating out to you and they're like backwards skating?
Yeah. Hey.
Like they scooter someone out there, like
Yeah.
scooter race back in
Yeah.
the 90s. Are you going to tip them?
Here's the problem.
The card.
It's the card. I don't
I will
carry cash any longer. So what they should do is on the electronic system, give me a place where I can tip.
I have gone to Sonic before and I had to give like a ton of quarters because I didn't have any cash. And I told them, I said, why the hell does your company not care about you?
Exactly.
Because they
What I
know
did.
they could just add, put a tip on there and you would make double or triple your money.
Exactly. Car hops used to make a ton of money at Sonic. But now they don't make shit because nobody ever carries cash on them anymore. And that's what we're moving to. We're moving to a cashless society. China is a huge cashless society now. Everywhere they
personally,
go.
I only carry Bitcoin. No,
Everywhere they go, they all do it through their phones. They pay for everything through their phones. You know that, Scott?
Yes.
In China, they're paying everything through their phones now.
I was still on Sonic outside.
Oh, sorry.
I'm a little behind.
Thank you. For the
Scott, what do you think about the? I can't get Danny answer.
sorry,
What do you
I'm
think
weird
about
when
the
it
Trump
comes to
border
that.
situation?
You really are.
But I mean, you know what I mean?
No, I don't. But I
Like if I
appreciate.
drop my thumb down in your beer hole,
And you
right there,
put
like,
your
here, man, let me
hand,
hand
you
it
put
to
your
I'm
hand
not
on
gonna
the
do it.
rim.
Look it.
I get it because
Look
here's
it.
the thing: at restaurants, I have to
Touch
have a
it.
straw.
Yeah.
And I told my dad, I said,
I
I have to
deserve-
have a straw at restaurants because I hate putting my mouth on that. And he says, well, how the hell do you eat off a fork?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I said, well played, Dad. But then I was like, okay, but I still try to put my face on as little things as possible
Yeah.
when I'm trusting someone that's getting paid not $15 an hour to wash those dishes.
Yeah.
You know what? Now I agree with the minimum wage raising, just so dishes are cleaner when I go eat.
I gotta say this. I just stepped outside. I viewed our podcast as a viewer.
Yeah.
It sounds really good.
Oh, good.
Audio,
You can hear
mean like
everything.
audio? Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, no Amber alerts, especially not
Yeah.
crackhead bitches picking up strangers and giving them their babies in their
Look,
cars.
that baby got what it deserved.
Cocaine's a
I
little
should
drug.
also say, I think I should be on a 3 beer minimum or maximum.
I was
Minimum?
trying to hint that towards you, and then
I know. Well, I'm a terrible.
here's the thing: we're going to tell you, Scott. This actually is not a podcast. This is an intervention. All your friends are telling you. Scott's mom, say something right now. Say something to him.
She's
because
in
for
heaven.
her,
She's in heaven.
If you're gonna drink more than 3 beers, drink beers that aren't so gross.
These are awesome.
Oh, they're too hopsy.
You want me to finish yours?
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm not a huge beer drinker though these days.
No. Tyler Mercer has joined our show.
Hello,
So
Tyler.
what else is going on in current events before we get to our main topic? Nobody wants to talk about the Trump border thing. I get it. I'm kind of tired of it.
No, I sent a video about that where CNN was trying to
Oh, I've got to pull up that
Hey,
photo.
Put the link of that guy back in the comments if you can. That guy was incredible because the CNN person was trying to bait him the entire time to like jump into some kind of argument about protecting these people, and he was like, "You guys have no idea what we see on a day in day out basis."
Exactly, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
He really stepped it up to her. And the other thing too that she was trying to get him on was she was talking about how those guys were making light of such a bad situation.
All right.
And like she's like, you should never laugh about kids being taken away from their family. And it breaks it down to how, she was trying to say that, and he was like, man, that's just people making light of a bad situation. He said it's how some people deal with stuff. And it's absolutely true. I may hear something.
There's a lot of victims of jokes, and sometimes you just got to say we're making light of a social issue, and you just got to laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that when if you're making a fat joke, or you're making white people's hair smells like wet dogs, or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Like someone's on the butt end of that.
Yeah.
But it's like most comedians I know, they just joke on everyone, so it's not like racist or chauvinistic or anything. But just make fun of everything. Hey, I wanted to go to our page real quick. We did a little poll this week. 73% says Leo over Brad Pitt. Where were you guys stand on that?
I'm going to go Brad Pitt's a better actor.
I went all Leo.
I'm Leo too.
Yeah.
I love Brad Pitt. It's hard to say, but man, Leo's got so many. The Departed.
Gilbert Grape.
Inception, I thought was a really good movie at the time.
Never
it's
watched
got
Inception.
played out.
Inception was a great script.
I never watched it.
It was a great movie because it was a premise that hadn't really been done.
Yeah,
that was a
Mr.
great
and Mrs.
script.
Smith.
Leo
Mr.
was
Smith
just.
was decent.
But here's the
I
thing,
mean,
Leo
you
was
got-
How
just
did you say
Leo.
that over Fight Club, man? Where's your manhood?
You got Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
You've got
got,
Legends of the Falls.
No, you got.
Dude, that was an amazing.
What
movie.
was the one he was in with Gina Smith? Where he was Thelma and Louise. He was in Thelma and Louise. That was a great one.
Hey, go to our page and vote on our poll, or
terrible
shoot us something in the
references.
comments. Let us know, Brad Pitt or Leo. But Leo is kicking butt. He's 73% to 27% Brad. We're 66% over here.
Please play this video right here.
I wanted to show this real quick. Take my screen. I want to show this
I'm gonna take
picture.
it.
This is why we're doing Unparty Garage. Look at this. Same exact. Do they hear my audio over the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Same exact newspaper, same exact date, sold in different areas depending on the level, and I just went away from it.
My wife is watching.
Good. Hey, Amy.
Hey, man.
And
Same exact newspaper, same exact
John
date.
Hendricks.
Sold in different areas depending on the level of political parties in the area. This is clear case of the media training our brain. Look at this. Trump talks tough on wall. Trump softens his tone. Exact same date, exact same paper. They changed the headlines based on the demographic of where that paper was going. Does that not piss y'all off? Is it just me that gets pissed off at that?
I want to talk about this, but I also have to acknowledge.
Okay, we're not going to go somewhere else then come back to this. So just go
Well, no,
ahead.
what I'm saying is you brought something up and people are still responding to it. My wife went off on Brad Pitt being the best person ever.
Go.
On your subject, though, that you have right now.
So go back to that.
Yeah, dude, I'm all over the place. I want to say this. I put this in our little group conversation about it. The newspaper is nothing but a place to garnish advertisement.
Okay, but people don't know that.
Yeah, I think they do.
No, they don't. Poor people are getting tricked, and I shouldn't even say poor people. There are people that think Fox News is the gospel, and there are people that think CNN is the gospel, and they don't understand that these news stations are specifically and intentionally biased to further their establishment's agenda while also selling advertisement and ratings. People don't recognize that. It's taking advantage of people.
All right, so let's talk about it.
I mean, that's why we're doing this show, right? It's to get the word out.
Yeah, so here's
But
the
people
word
don't
on
know that.
Here's the word on that newspaper. However, these opposing headline editions were not distributed to different political or geographical markets, nor were they intended to influence voters. This picture shows two editions of the Wall Street Journal published at different times of the day. The paper on the left came off the press early in the day, while the paper on the right was produced later in the day. Print newspapers sometimes undergo revisions throughout their daily runs and typically employ marks to distinguish the various editions. In this case, the different Wall Street Journal editions are distinguishable by the number of stars displayed in the masthead. Colin Schwartz, the Vice President of the Communications, Wall Street Journal, confirmed to us that these editions were printed at different times, not in different markets. The edition on the left was published after Trump met with the Mexican president early in the day and referenced the seemingly cooperative tone of their discussion. And the edition on the right was published after Trump delivered a speech on immigration later in the day and referenced Trump's reasserting his stance that he would force Mexico to pay for the building of the wall on the U.S.-Mexico. So the picture you just put up was misleading media. This true story behind it has a logical answer as to why.
All right, but what about the video where you have tons of different local news stations?
I'm not saying you're not wrong. I'm not saying you're not wrong about how media is trying to manipulate. I'm just saying that meme or that picture right there was a bad representation of your argument.
Hey, what's the last comment you see on our thread?
Well, the last comment that it's on our thread right now is
Hi, Sparrow?
no.
Yeah, that's
No, it's my son Jackson trying to participate
Good.
in
Hey,
our
Jackson.
conversation. Hey,
what up, Jackson?
Hey, buddy.
It's your Uno partner.
Uno.
Let's
Yes.
say that via the internet, man. What if like a DHR member tunes in? I mean, we are not talking
screwed.
kid-friendly stuff right now.
We are.
They're going to enforce
I
that.
can't find the comments, man. I'm trying to see what you guys are saying. Scott, tell me what some of the people are saying so we can talk about it. Were they still talking about Leo?
Man, the last time their comments were talking about was still about
A
tips.
$2 tip would be okay. Becky Pierce says a $2 tip would be okay if you drink at the bar. Get takeout if tip isn't in the budget. Always
agree.
tip.
Yeah.
True, Becky. So true.
True, Dad. My
there they
8-year-old
are.
is
I had to go
also
down that up.
trying to
Brad.
figure out what this show is about.
Amy McCoy Ross, do you say Brad because you think he's more attractive or a better actor? Just curious.
I got to be honest with you. So
'Cause I
one of
think
my,
Leo's the better actor.
in
Personally.
that movie Snatch,
Snatch.
you know Brad
That's a
Brad
good
Pitt, when he did that pikey accent, he's like,
no.
he had to throw in a pair of them shoes too.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
he did Snatch. He
We're
did
trying to get
Fight Club. Fight Club was.
We're trying to get
Yeah,
that.
Y'all
Yeah,
don't think
go
Fight
ahead.
Club was Brad Pitt's
Yeah, the
best
proper
movie?
fault.
Am I
No,
wrong with that?
Snatch
Oh.
all day.
Proper
I like
fault.
Snatch.
Proper fault.
Snatch was his best acting performance. It wasn't the best of all the movies, though I do love that movie.
Yeah, it always going to get proper fault.
He wasn't
Oh,
even
yeah.
in that movie that much. I mean,
tell you what,
he
you-
had a decent Irish accent.
And I tell you what, you're throwing a pair of them shoes too.
Yeah, but it was
We
weird
gotta
in
get
that
a
movie. That movie was.
You're going to get a shirt.
That movie
You
was
like
more
dads?
about what's his name? The
Well, yeah.
Jason.
Yeah, but
Statham.
Brad Pitt
Yeah.
made that movie. Do you like dogs?
I like the
Amy
movie.
says that it's Brad Pitt's looks, which is probably because why she married me. Clearly, because of my smile. She just said, "Have you seen that smile?" She was referring to my smile and my overwhelming personality.
I was gonna say it's your stunning jawline or your winning personality, but
It
either way.
also could be.
Brad Pitt wears
don't
that
do it.
hat. Brad Pitt's got one of those
Hello.
hats.
Do it. Let me
Hello.
zoom out of that real quick
Yeah,
before we lose
zoom
viewers.
in.
The people that aren't tuned in live are gonna hate seeing that part. We're gonna have to edit that out.
Yeah, well,
Nah, man. What do you guys? So
Amy now wants to know what the scary Santa is doing next to you.
vacation
I think we should
Santa,
talk about it.
Vacation Santa, and he's an OG. Amy.
OG
That's
for
why.
real though.
OG
Yeah.
from '93. We've been through a lot together. Me and
Yeah.
Vacation
5
Santa.
plus 4 pennies. Add that shit up.
Yeah. I don't even know what that means.
He does.
Yeah, exactly.
What album is that from?
Chronic.
Chronic.
Chronic. The Chronicles of Narnia. My wife says exactly, you look just like him.
Why did you say love my wife and Amy said don't forget about me? Is there something y'all haven't told me about yet?
Something.
It's a open relationship.
It,
Wait up, you said that like it was from experience. Is me and
Something we all
Vacation
wanna
Santa
tell
the only
you.
ones that don't know something over here?
yeah.
I met Amy for the first time at Vacation Bible School. I didn't tell you how crazy it gets in those things. You know,
Hey, so
we had a penny drive.
y'all pissed him off, man.
You
Why y'all
killed
messed-
Santa.
Did seriously, after we talked about him that long, he
Yeah.
fell?
You killed first Jesus, now Santa.
Hey, no, so we gotta address something. This is from our fan. It's not on the live comments, but Vicky Lynn Dennison. wanted us to, she said something about the healthcare bubble, right? Or she said something about it, y'all going to talk about healthcare.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I'd love to address the healthcare bubble or the collegiate bubble. And she said, what's the collegiate bubble? Expand. So I'm going to briefly expand on that, and then I'll let you guys take it. Vicky, here's what I mean by the collegiate bubble. I think college and additional schooling is a bubble. If you look, now this is my research. I don't claim to be a professional, all right? I don't claim to be a doctor at this, but here's what my research says. My research says if you look at the tuition to go to universities in the 60s and what the tuition has slowly raised to now, it doesn't support that of inflation.
Right.
I also think people are being sold on the idea that they have to have degrees to get jobs, but more and more people are getting degrees and not getting jobs.
Right.
I also think that as far as those jobs go, so first of all, I believe that we could educate people in a far more intelligent way, more efficient way with the technology we have these days and stuff, but people are still being pushed into those by tradition. The other thing is it's predatory lending to some extent, right? Kids are signing loans at 17, 18, 19 years old for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The frontal lobe hasn't developed, right? We've talked about your frontal lobe's not developed till you're 25 years old, right? So at 18 years old, and that is one of the only things that cannot be forgiven through bankruptcy, right? You can forgive credit card debt, you can forgive all this stuff, but you can't forgive that through bankruptcy. So when you look at the raise in tuition, the astronomical raise in tuition that does not meet anything to do with the raise in inflation, right? The numbers are way off there. When you look at how much people are paying for these loans and then the type of jobs they're getting with those loans when you get standard business or marketing degrees or whatever, the amount that you paid for that is not fair to the amount of money that the average person is earning off that. And then when you look at the fact that we have basically shunned using technology to some extent because of tradition for these universities, I think there's a huge collegiate bubble. Agree or disagree, Scott and Danny?
Absolutely agree. I'm still paying student loans. And I graduated in 1995 when you were just a fetus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to start?
Please.
I think
We all
things college was a good idea, but not pointing any fingers. It could be done better.
Well,
So-
you and yours are not welcome in my house.
Don't ask me and Ron for nothing. Look, here's the thing. Real talk. College is fucking stupid. I'm not saying don't educate yourself, but I am saying I'm a huge proponent of going to these alternative schools. I got
schools.
I got buddies of mine who all they ever wanted to do was fuck with computers, right? Network engineers. And so they went to Virginia College and worked for 2 years, got their degrees in network engineering, and they all came out making 80-something grand a year because all they did was hyper focus on, I want to work on computers. So they just went to school for computers. They didn't have to take an art. They didn't have to take
These
theater
electives.
appreciation.
These electives that you could go watch a YouTube video
exactly.
on.
They didn't have to do any of that bullshit. All right. The second thing that you hit on, school should not take, high school, first off, shouldn't take 4 fucking years. College takes 4 years. High school shouldn't take 4 years. But they trick these kids into thinking they gotta have a degree in order to make something of themselves. But they all
Well,
get
they
in
make
there.
that decision before they even know what the career marketplace looks like outside
Because
of
they
fast
think,
food.
well, I'll just do my basic stuff and then I got 2 more years, which college usually takes about 5 years to graduate from because it's supposed to be 4, but most students graduate in 5. Okay? And so, because they set it up that way to maximize the money out of them. Then these kids come out and they owe more than they could ever possibly pay back in a timely manner. And they got a job, unless they went for like law or to be a doctor or something where there's definite need in the job system for, they're coming out with a business degree. Or they're coming out with a freaking marketing degree or something like that. And then you know where they end up? They end up at Lone Star.
No, you know what they end up?
No, they end up with Lone Star waiting tables.
People like me without a degree interviews them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It determines if we want to give them a
What
job.
do you think
Yeah,
of my
but that's what
theater
happens.
degree?
Exactly. This motherfucker graduated in 1995 on a theater degree.
Yes.
And he's still paying student loans. So for somebody to say to be or not to be, he
Look,
paid for that shit.
here's my
You
thing.
can get on YouTube.
As it is right now, if
And
you want to
educate
become
yourself.
a doctor or a nurse, you need to go to college.
MIT,
You want to become a lawyer.
MIT,
Yeah, but I
Harvard,
still
all
think
those
there's-
places put their college courses
I've been
online
studying
for free.
physics for the last year through Audible books and YouTube, and I guarantee you I know just as much about physics as a ton of college people. My point is that it's overinflated by tradition, and it's overinflated by empty promises that do not weigh out with how much money you spend to get that
No,
degree. And I
doesn't make
agree.
sense.
Why the hell are we wasting our time taking elective classes?
Yeah.
You should be able to choose if you want to learn art. There's enough resource out there that you could go learn art on your own. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have to learn art to become
You
a
can get on
freaking
YouTube and learn
RN.
trigonometry. That's what I told. Look, I won't mention any names, but I got a friend.
Theater major?
No, I got a friend of mine who had a 16-year-old who was struggling in school. And when I say struggling in school, I don't mean they couldn't cut the grades. This kid was already doing, advanced math classes and stuff like that. He was struggling socially in school. So at 16 years old, I coached him into dropping out of high school. Okay? But we had a plan. I said, he dropped out of high school. When we got it all set up, he dropped out of high school. He took his GED.
And went
All
to
right, in
research program.
October, he took his GED in October. He dropped out in August, took his GED in October, and he started first semester college classes as a freshman that following January. And he is now 2 years ahead of his friends that are just now graduated high school.
So I went to ministry school. My goal, I got a GED. I dropped
He's
out
always
of high
taking
school.
it to religion.
No,
All
I'm
right.
not going to religion.
I'm kidding.
Jesus this, Jesus that.
Love Jesus. So I go to ministry school. My plan was to go to college, actually.
Right.
My plan was to go to college the whole time. I start working my third year of ministry school at a sales job, and I start making $50,000 a year at a sales job.
Yeah.
And I said, why would I go to college? Now, for me, I wanted to be a business owner, or I wanted to be in sales or sales management. I felt like the 4 years of hustling and saving money and doing what I was already good at sales was the best thing for me. But academia would still criticize that. I think the biggest problem is the student loans and how expensive they are, and how we sign people up at such a young age when we have scientifically proven through academia that people are not. I'm taking the camera off y'all because y'all are screwing around. I'm putting it on there. Screw you guys. I'll take this show home. I think that I just don't think the amount of money that you pay to go to college outweighs what you get from going to college in a lot of professions. There
The
are
juice
professions.
isn't worth
There's
the squeeze.
professions where you need to go to college. So look, if you're trying to get your RN right now, don't drop out of college because you watched our podcast. But marketing, business, some of these really broad, very typical degree. There's so many people out there with that degree. There's not enough demand to pay those people what they're paying for student loans. So I think it needs to be addressed. I also just think we can be more efficient. Now, Becky says it's overinflated by football teams. Becky, I do think people should go to college to play college football. I actually think college football players should get paid, though.
I do too.
I
I
think they should
did.
get paid with more than a scholarship.
My senior project was on that very thing.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I think, look, they're an
Shakespeare
employee.
talked about
They're an
it.
employee. They have to wear a uniform.
Yeah.
They have to do. They
They
have to
can't.
show
They can't
up
take a
late.
job.
They can't take.
What
a
about
job.
the NCAA? That Colorado quarterback that got accepted to the Olympics, and the NCAA said, "Well, you can't you can't go to the Olympics because you're a quarterback for the University of Colorado.
They should get paid.
and you get certain stipends when you're up there at Olympic Village." And so he had to make a decision.
So if the college wants to be treated like a private institution, and the college wants to say, they should have the ability to pay if they want to, first of all. Okay? But even if the college says, we're just going to pay you with a scholarship, you should be able to get endorsement deals. If you're a college football player and you're doing incredible, you should be able to get endorsement deals. You should be able to say, hey, let's create an NCAA PS4 game, and I want to get paid every time you use my face and my name and my jersey on that game.
To me, there's a very obvious problem with doing that. That
Okay.
is the reason that they, I think regulate it is you don't want to mess with people's education and confuse it with, their ability to play sports or not play sports.
Are they already doing that though? With some of these kids are taking like camping classes and shit like that.
Yes, they do it. They are absolutely, there's a system in place that is saying, don't do it this way. But they're finding all the loopholes and all of that. So it is a thing where I believe that there should be money put in escrow of some sort based on, what they do, but I don't believe a student while they're in college should also be making millions of dollars because they're at this organization or that organization.
But they're making millions of dollars for, you look at Saban, that dude gets paid over $5 million a year.
I was going to say, but so who should be making those millions? You think the athletic director and the school and the coaches are the only people that should make millions of dollars for an incredible football team like Alabama or any of these things? I'm not trying to go biased on Alabama.
Yeah, well, Texas makes more money than Alabama does.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. If you've got a Johnny Manziel, right? If you've got the best quarterback in the country, that guy shouldn't get the millions of dollars that people are paying to come watch him at that game. They're not there to watch that damn coach that got fired and cried.
Well, I would argue that they're not coming to watch Johnny Manziel. I would say that they're coming to watch their college win a football game. And I think that the college football coach, a Saban, whoever it is, should receive a competitive salary based on the fact that, somebody else could come in and take that job. However, I think the students should be there first and foremost for an education. And I believe that there should be in escrow money held for them based on certain criteria, but it shouldn't be a...
Why do you think we should dictate what students are there for? That doesn't sound like freedom to me.
Because you said students. Because if there was...
Students have jobs?
No. What I'm saying is, it's part of an educational organization. That student is representing that university, and that university is providing an education to that student. I do think that there are special students and special cases, and there should be some sort of compensation for that.
I think football players get pimped. I think they're getting pimped.
At what level?
At every fucking level.
Yeah, because
down.
millions of dollars are being made
off the backs of those kids.
And they're getting paid with a scholarship, but that is not really why they're there, because a lot of them are trying to go pro. Now we're talking top-level universities.
And they tell you, well, we're giving you an opportunity to do this and do that and get a great education. Not really. Because not only do I have to show my ass up at practice at 6 in the morning,
Hell yeah.
and I got to show my ass up at practice at 4 in the afternoon after I'm out of classes. And when all my friends are going off to, to spring break and stuff like this, I can't even get a job.
And if somebody throws you a suit to wear to not some nice ceremony, you can lose
Matt,
your career.
Yeah.
Are you an Alabama fan?
I'm not going to answer that because I am, but this is a bait question. I can tell by how you asked it.
It is. Do you follow Alabama because of who the quarterback is, because of who the running back is, because of who the wide receiver is?
I know it was a dumb...
I know. You don't.
I follow them because I've watched them since the early 90s. I watched them way before Saban, if that's what you're doing.
You're following Alabama. You're not following...
If Alabama sucked, would you watch them every time?
I did
believe
watch them
they
when they
would.
sucked, but you know what? I'm a little more intense about the games when they're great.
Absolutely.
So the players do make a
But
difference for me.
it makes a difference, but it is not the same thing as the NFL.
But that's not everybody.
No. A lot of people watched Auburn because of Cam Newton.
But if you listen to an Alabama fan,
The
and an Auburn
viewership
fan,
and the cash is way higher for Alabama when they have a good team made up of great players.
yeah. But if you listen to an Alabama fan and an Auburn fan, it is the program that they care the most about.
But it's on the program they care about is because of all the kids that came before that built that program to begin with. You're talking about the program that was built on the backs of all those kids that didn't get shit for playing.
Let me ask this, man. If you guys are watching, whether you're watching this later once we upload it or watching it live, tell us what you think. Amy says, made $70,000 previous job without a degree. She agrees with Matt. Thanks, Amy. I agree with me too, and I agree with you. Some of the wealthiest people I know don't have college degrees. I'm not saying don't get a college degree. I'm just saying be practical about what you're going to get out of college. And if you don't know, don't go. Wait, work, make some money, and then go later. Because if you're just going because someone tells you you have to, you might get tricked, and you might be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for the rest of your life for a damn degree that anybody and their mom can have. Look, we interview people every day. We do look for a college degree. What else do we look for instead of a college degree? 2-year sales experience. You can get 2-year sales experience quicker than you can get a college degree most of the time.
Right. And make money while you're doing it.
Right. we're going to jump off this subject. I am going to say real quick, Scott, you put episode number 2, not me.
No.
Yes, you did. I didn't control our live stream. You got all the buttons over there.
There's
and shit,
the
bro.
name right there.
Yeah, it's you. Thank you. Since he called me at the beginning of the show, if you're watching, let's send some back his way. Now we're going to jump into our shit, bro. July 4th is tomorrow. We want to talk a little bit about the Founding Fathers. I want to tell you guys this and to all our viewers. I'm reading an incredible book called, I'm going to mess it up if I try to quote it without looking at it, but I think it's called the People's History of America, or the American History of the People. But anyways,
I am reading American History X.
Isn't that a movie?
Yeah, very well maybe.
He's reading the screenplay.
Yeah.
It's got some weird time.
I'm reading this book, and here's what it does. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but what we're taught in public schools is not all true. We're overly painted this overly biased picture. I'm not against our founding fathers, but we wanted to talk, and we want you guys to share what you know. Tell us about the founding fathers, because we have our research has shown that there's a lot of myths out there, right? So one thing, so go check that book out. People's History of America is what I believe it's called.
Send that to me. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it's a lot of hours though. I'm like 15 hours in, and there's like 30 hours left on the Audible book.
That's nothing.
But it's really good.
I'm a fucking master on Audible books.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you know that about me.
Okay, good. So, so here's what it does. It takes passages from founding fathers, from Christopher Columbus, from Spanish people when they were, raping and pillaging villages, and it takes all this stuff and
I don't think you like Spanish
it
people.
gives you the good, bad, and the ugly. So,
Hey, Trump supporter over here is Spanish. Those Spanish people,
there
they're
we
not
go.
raping and killing
No, the
people.
actual Spanish. That's not.
Not the Mexicans.
Where's my flag that I wave when he overtalks me? So.
You are the world's worst. At
You
fucking
actually
talking, by the
blew
way.
that
I
one
did,
yourself.
I did.
You said the Mexican people.
Yeah.
No, the Spanish people while they were raping.
I said when they raped and pillaged villages, they did.
What villages?
And that's what Trump
All from the
said.
Caribbean.
And he was wearing a red hat when he said it.
Make
What you got to
them-
say now?
Spanish people are from fucking Spain, Danny.
Say that.
Spain.
Say that to the
Spain. People from
Guatemalans.
Spain that were settlers in America is from Spain did that. So look, Scott, I'm gonna hand it off to you, man. You brought up a great point earlier about how a big portion, if not the majority, of people in America that were British did not want the Revolutionary War, right?
Let me say this.
It was 1/3.
Over the last couple of days, so we've been kind of kicking around our ideas for what we're going to do for the podcast as our main theme. We talked about the founding fathers, and so I wanted to kind of go in and look at what it is about these founding fathers that people have a myth about. What is the reality? All this kind of stuff. And so it kind of started for me. That's what we were talking about before in the pregame. Was there are a couple of things that I grew up just kind of thinking was the truth. One, I thought that there was a group of people in England and they decided this is terrible. We don't like this place. They're mean to us. Let's go over to America and let's start a new country. And so we can be these God-fearing people over in America. And I'm not saying that there weren't some people in that group that went over for that cause, but
They went to Holland first. And kicked out of Holland.
they did a lot of trips, and they were going to India, whatever it was.
Well, they went to Holland first, and they were seeking religious freedom. They went to Holland, and Holland put up with that shit and kicked their asses out, and that's how they found their way to the Americas.
Thank you, Danny.
I'm sorry.
I needed that. No, I really needed that.
Okay.
But basically, one of the
knows history.
yeah, he really does, and I told him that before the show, and he thought I was patronizing him, but I really wasn't. But the reality is that for me, I kind of had an understanding that they were coming to America right off the bat. They got into it and they fought everybody. But the reality is that was the 13 colonies were established in the 1606. Is that what we said earlier? And and then it wasn't until the 1700s, the late 1700s, before we actually set out a constitution.
Well, all right, so I
Please
want you
come
to
back.
keep going, but I want to pause and back
Please
up a little
pause.
bit.
I want to back
First
up,
of all,
rewind.
the first picture that was painted was we came over here and just started killing the crap out of Indians.
Oh.
Or Native Americans to take over
Yeah.
the land, right? 90% of Native Americans were killed by disease. It was from early settlers, but when you talk, oh, God. All right, So let me try to continue.
I didn't-
I can't. I just got a visual. Man, you're taking your shirt off. You're licking shit. It's getting weird around here. Vacation Santa's getting creeped out.
Hey, what does it
I know.
mean, Facebook friends?
So
what does it
let's-
mean when your tongue's like solid white?
So
Are you
90
dehydrated?
No, it's that damn IPA, man. It's that hopsy beer. 90%
so
of
good.
Native Americans were wiped out before majority of the original settlers in the 1600s ever even got here. Smallpox and disease that was spread. So they come, only 10% of the Native Americans are left. Scott, continue with your history.
So basically, it wasn't until the 1700s that people actually said, hey, they've already been 13 colonies that were actually British colonies. And people like the aristocrats, the wealthy British colonials were basically getting to a point where they were like, why are we sending all our money back to England when we could be managing all of this on our own? And they had been managing it for a long time. And all of a sudden,
Start getting into second generations that are firstborn Americans.
oh yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like the way I understood it when I was growing up, it was like there were these people that were being oppressed by England that moved over to America to start a new country that was going to be America, but they were here for over 100 years as a British colony. And so one of the things that I saw earlier today was that out of 5 British people, if a poll was taken, survey says 3 out of those 5 were pretty okay with
British colony.
because they're
Everything I'd ever learned was 2/3 of the populace did not want to break away.
I said 3 out of 5, so I think we're close.
pretty close.
We may be a little bit off, but the reality is, it wasn't going to affect them one way or the other. Do you want a rich guy that lives
Well,
in
they were all
England?
the same. It was rich guys overseas or rich guys locally, right?
Well,
And
famous.
then even to support what you're saying, the original American Revolution, like there's
really
like
good, Danny.
there's like shady. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But now Scott's not helping by compliment.
I had to.
There were shady recruiting tactics for the Revolutionary War. A lot of people were indentured servants that were picked up.
Oh,
A lot
yeah.
of people were just like drunkards that were offered this job for cash, and then when they didn't have cash, they just kind of said, screw it. So yeah, I mean, basically what happened was there was wealthy English people in England, there were wealthy English people in America. The wealthy English people in America said, dude, I think we got enough people around now that we could take this land for ourselves, right? Is that
Oh,
that's where you're going?
that's exactly what I was saying. It was a thing where they were, for the majority of the people, if it was 2/3 or 3 out of 5, it wasn't going to be that big of a difference for them whether or not their taxation was happening from people that lived here or people that lived overseas. And realistically, if you watch kind of what happened and you read the historical accounts of everything that happened, yeah, if you look at historically what happened, basically the wealthy colonists decided, hey, let's get together, let's start our own country. And it had nothing to do with religion and freedom of religion. It was simply, hey, we think we can do this now on our own. And we were talking earlier about the fact that there was the French and Indian War, and that was a big controversy. Britain didn't really want us to get into that war in the first place. I mean, really, Britain was the target of that war. Danny,
So-
you were talking about that.
The way I heard it, here's how all of this came to pass. All right, it's what was called the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, but it's technically the 7 Years' War.
Not the 7-Day War that happened
The
in
7 Years'
Israel
War. This shit
in the
started,
60s.
it was like 1755 or some shit like that.
And the
Basically,
French and Indian War was French and Indians on the same side.
French and, all right, so there were Indians on both sides. The British had Indians on their side,
French had more.
and then the French had Indians on their side. And then there were smart Indians that were kind of playing them off each other. All right. So basically, what happened was the reason all this came to a head, and Great Britain, you got to understand this: King George III didn't want this war. All right. Even though it left them as the first really superpower, it also left them in a weak financial position. Basically, what happened was, with the colonies expanding westward, which was their main goal. What's wrong?
There was fireworks and it distracted.
Okay.
And then Scott somehow posted, I've had too many beers.
Well, with the colonies expanding westward, all right, the French traders, which was mostly all that was over there, was traders and hunters and shit like that, were afraid that Great Britain was going to get too fucking powerful. And so they launched a preliminary.
Sugar plantations.
Yeah, they had a shit ton of sugar plantations in the Caribbean, and they were like, Spain did too, by the way. Talking about the Spaniards.
Now we can talk about them without trying.
So the French said, preemptive strike, let's kind of stop them here. And so the Brits didn't want to fight the war, but they got in there and they beat that ass.
It was a French offensive war to
Yeah.
try to stop the expansion.
Yeah,
of
and so
England.
and so they figured they had to do something, and so this big fucking war happened. Great Britain came out on top in the end, right?
Right.
But and then they did what was called what was it, Scott? The Royal Proclamation Line.
I was going to say that.
1763, Great Britain said came out with a Royal Proclamation Line, and basically what it said was you can't expand past the Appalachians. All right, the rest is for the Indians. Now they did that for two reasons. Okay, they did it because they had just got done with the war.
Said it was for the Indians?
No, the Great Britain.
Oh.
They said, they did that for two reasons. One, they just spent a shit ton of money. Two, they didn't want the Indians to continue to harass the settlers, right? So they said you can't expand past this part anymore. So that pissed off the British colonists, who the whole reason coming over here was for westward expansion, to do whatever
Right.
the hell you want.
Make more money.
But the king said, hell to the no, we just had this big ass war, and we can't afford you to fuck shit up for us and have the Indians attack us and kill more people.
So we were birthed out of greed.
So what happened was
It was that question.
it was that, and then it was the whole taxation without representation truly played a role. But basically what happened was...
basically these super wealthy British people.
Well, hang on, let me finish my point. Basically what happened was...
How do you take this off?
Great Britain basically said, look guys, all this land that we just conquered, and now that you'll be able to trade on, because that's why the French attacked, because of trade. And so now Great Britain said, look, now you got all this fucking land that we just fought 7 years for. You got all this trade possibility and stuff like this. You, the Americas, which are all British colonists, will now benefit more than we will over here. You're going to benefit from this. So they wanted to introduce a tax to help pay for the war that they just finished fighting. And by the way, the 7-year war was not just fucking, what's his name, Winston Churchill.
No.
Said that it was really the First World War, because this shit was taking place in India, it was taking place in Prussia, it was all over the fucking globe. But they said, since this is going to benefit you, we're going to pass the buck to you as well. You need to help pay some taxes on this.
Absolutely.
And they didn't want to do it.
No.
And so Great Britain kept backing down, and they tried to throw another tax, and the American colonists were like, fuck you, we're not paying that. And finally Great Britain said, look, enough is enough. We're going to put a tax on the tea. Okay? And we're talking about a 1% tax. And that's when the British colonists said, fuck you, we're not going to do it. No taxation without representation. But you got to think from a British standpoint, the Great Britain was like, well, you are represented because you're British citizens and you're a British colonist.
Yeah.
But the American people said, well, we're not being represented. So they went to war over the tax, and they went to war over feeling that they weren't represented. But from Great Britain's standpoint, they absolutely were represented. And the people, and so 1/3, the rebels made up 1/3 of the colonists. The other 2/3 didn't want to go to war, and that's what started an actual civil war. It was a civil war. And so everybody looks down at the Loyalists. The Loyalists were British colonists. If you want to talk about any spin,
Right.
it's these rebels were fucking around with the British. The Loyalists were like, hey, fuck you. This is our country. We're British Loyalists. Why are you trying to go to war against us? So, that's the whole take. That's why it happened. Some bullshit.
Here's the awesome part. I did that research, Danny. And you just passionately explained it.
It's been a long. I'm sure I fucked up.
A couple things happened while you were talking.
Come on.
A,
I
you laid it
apologize.
all- No,
No,
you laid it all
I
out.
think people want to. I mean, that's a good content.
I want to say this.
because people don't know
Grace-
that. That's not what the public school says.
Yeah.
No, and Grace Spencer commented on the size of your watch. That's why I took it off.
Oh,
And so
he say?
he said,
He said your
Daniel's
big-ass
big
watch
ass
is getting
watch
in the
is
way.
distracting. So I got it. I took care of that. And I've turned Matt up So I just wanted to catch you up with what's going on here. And Brian Lindsay
I
is
think
watching.
that's a great little quick history lesson because all right. So let me address some other myths while we're at it.
Please do.
So Danny, perfect illustration. A lot of what I'm reading really supports that. Here's some other things people don't realize. I know y'all don't want to hear about First Nation, but the Haudenosaunee.
Dude, you love talking
Let
about.
me just get this, man. Let me make this point. With the fucking
There were.
with the fucking overtime.
It should be said that there were only
O'Doul's
4
for
of
Scott
them.
before future episodes.
There were only 4 Haudenosaunee.
That's not true.
I'm just kidding.
You know what I'm talking about.
I can't even say
The
it.
Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, helped. No, I'm actually not making the First Nation point. I'm making a point about the Founding Fathers.
Okay, come on.
So let me finish. The Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, it was passed in 1988 that they had to be given credit that they helped write the Constitution.
Right.
All through the Constitution, it's all this all men are created equal stuff, right? That's from the Haudenosaunee. And the way you can know that, listen to me, the way you can know that is because they didn't believe all men were created equal. You had, most white people could not even vote when our country was first formed. Most white people couldn't even vote,
You had to own
okay?
land.
So all this stuff about how it was racist, it was all the white man, and it wasn't, black people or females or da-da-da. Not true. Most white people couldn't even vote. You had to be a landowner, and it had to be somewhat significant. So you had to be a fairly wealthy person to vote for our original American government. Now, I will say the original American government did bounce around abolishing slavery, and they took it out because they felt like they weren't going to get enough support if they abolished slavery. But there's a huge myth that we had these freedom fighters that were freedom fighters for everyone to have a voice, and it's simply not true. The aristocrats, the blue bloods, to your point, they didn't want anybody voting but them. And here's another thing people don't realize, black men were legally allowed to vote before even white women or any women were able to. But then they created all of these rules to try to keep black people from actually voting. So they started turning misdemeanors into felons to try to keep them from being able to vote.
Well, and one of the things that I read today about the original instigation of the Declaration of Independence was that the aristocratic white, they came from Britain. They were the 1 or 2 out of 5 that actually wanted secession. These people were frustrated because they said that if we're getting taxation without representation, then we're basically indentured, servants. We are basically slaves to this country that's over there, and we don't like that. We don't want that. We want to be.
But they had representation. They had representation. And what they're talking about, for people that don't know.
Please tell us,
when you
Danny.
talk about taxation without representation.
Yes.
They were talking about being represented in a parliamentary level in London, in the parliament. They wanted a voice inside the parliament. And they had a voice inside the parliament. They didn't agree with a voice inside the parliament.
They wanted more power.
Yeah.
They wanted more power. So look, we've debunked the myth that people came straight here because they wanted a better country, right? They went to Holland first, right? We've debunked the myth that people felt like our founding fathers were trying to bring equality to all, which wasn't true. They wanted only the wealthy landowners.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. Our founding fathers, first off, a lot of them wanted to abolish slavery. Thomas Jefferson was huge in trying to abolish slavery. George Washington was trying to abolish slavery.
Yeah.
The problem was,
even though they were slave owners.
Well, the problem was they were legally could not. Here's a little known fact.
No, they were going to lose the southern colonies.
It was a plantation economy.
Right.
Okay. And so, but George Washington found a loophole that when you die, your slaves could be released. And so, and this was in Virginia. So when he died, all George Washington's slaves were freed, if I remember correctly. Thomas Jefferson tried to do the same thing, but they sewed that loophole up. It was it was Virginia, the colony of Virginia, that said it is illegal to free your slaves. So even though they fought for this, the state side was saying it was illegal. And this was, George Washington fought for this his whole life. And so, like, Thomas Jefferson owned like 180 slaves, right? Yeah. And so people go, what a horrific guy. From what I understand, and somebody correct me out there if I'm wrong, he was buying slaves to try to give them
a better life.
To give them a better life, and then trying to get them free.
Slavery's wrong, but it was a barbaric time in the nation, and all of these nations had it. Let me say this about slavery, though. Think of how impactful. Scott is so distracting right now. All right, hold up. We'll get to you, Gray. Let me make this point real quick. So, listen. So, racism is a big problem in our country.
Gray has a question.
I can't say what I got to say for it.
Please.
Can I just get this?
I'm really distracting.
I know. You're very distracted right now.
I love you.
I love you, too. Scott only tells me that when he's had a six-pack.
Yeah.
Have I had a six-pack yet? I think I still have one more.
Racism in our country today. Can I address racism in our country today with your undivided attention, please?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Racism in our country today. Okay?
Racism
seems like a white versus black thing primarily. I'm sure there's other races involved. Let me address this. If you go back, and I know this isn't the Founding Fathers, but if you go back to the Civil War, the Southern people that were for racism and for slavery that were fighting the North, right? The poor Southerners had the least to gain from winning the Civil War had the Southerners won the Civil War. Freeing slaves would have driven a higher wage for poor white Southerners. Racism was created by the same aristocratic people that created funded the Revolutionary War, wanted only property owners to vote. They created racism intentionally as a calculated structure to help govern these plantations.
Racism
they basically,
was around way before
I'm not
that.
saying it wasn't around, but if you go back to Scotland, they were racist against their own color. It wasn't so much racism. It was, you look at the Highlanders and the Lowlanders in Scotland, and they already hated each other. They didn't need someone of a different color. But people already hated, it was racism because it was technically a different race of Scottish people.
No, that's not how that
To
works.
some, yes, all right, but so here's my point. Wealthy people went to indentured servants and slaves and said, hey, you don't own any property. You're basically a slave too, but you're a little bit better because you're white. And they helped create even more racism to help govern people.
Sure, yeah.
So if we think about how much racism is an issue in current times, what my question is A, what if it wasn't a calculated intention like it was on the plantations? And secondly, what would happen if slavery would have been abolished when we first started our country as opposed to 100 plus years later with the Emancipation Proclamation? What would that have done as far as how much better would we be as a society without that racism? That's all I was trying to say.
That's a lot.
It's important, man. That's important to look at. It's important to look at because there are ignorant people that think racism is just, they literally believe in racism. And it's like, no, man, a lot of racism's always been around since the beginning of time. But a lot of the racism in the South of the United States specifically was a calculated way for wealthy people to control poor people, and they tricked poor white people into believing they were a superior race so that they could better, in a more cheap way, govern the people, the workers of plantations. I think that's important to point out because there's so many poor white people right now that still feel that way and they don't realize that their great-great-grandparents got tricked and they're still falling for the same hate and the same trick.
Sure, but there was racism. There was also what I would call classism. There was a huge class distinction, which is more to your point.
Right.
In terms of, people on this level. Well, you're poor and you don't have, but you're white. So, but you're just in a separate class. It wasn't racism at that point.
Let me say this. I was in South Africa a year and a half ago.
Right.
And we're giving a tour. We're being given a tour of Cape Town.
Yeah.
And our host was a person of color. I'm going to say that. I don't want to say African American because they lived in South Africa.
He was an African.
Yeah. He was a person of color, different than mine. And this individual, it was really comical, and I'm okay with saying that it's comical because as we were driving around the city, he was pointing out different things. He would say, hey, look at that mountain, and he would tell us about that mountain, and he would tell us this and that. And then out of nowhere, we're driving through, and he goes, be very careful if you go into that part of the town because there are black people there.
And he was black?
And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm going, brother, I don't know if you know this, but you are also of the same color. And it was a thing where, to me, that was the perfect example of racism. Had nothing to do with the color of your skin.
You don't think that's cultural?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's my point.
But I don't
exactly.
look at that if a black person says, "Careful, there's black people over there."
Oh no.
You think that's racism, not cultural?
What I'm saying, he was talking about a different type of black person than him.
A class distinction.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the words that he used were, "That's a black person. You want to be careful when you go over there." And even the bigger irony of the whole thing, and that's
Now paint a picture for me. I mean, are we talking? Was he Wesley Snipes, or like, was there a distinction on the skin color? Were they the
he
same?
was Halle Berry, and she was Wesley Snipes, and they were Wesley Snipes.
So he was a lighter skinned black person.
He was a little bit lighter skinned.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah, Tiger Woods. But the reality was, and in that culture, in that society, in that, and this is a year and a half ago, it was, watch out for the black people. I'm not a black person. I don't know what he was saying that he was, but he wasn't a black person is what his point was, which to me, that means that racial issues are not simply about color. They are, and that was the best
Well, there's
example
hate
of
of
that
all
I've ever
kinds.
seen.
I mean, I actually hate using the word racism because whether you're gender biased, whether you're a homophobe, whether you're a racist, all you're talking about is labels. And that's the problem with our society today is we find labels and we judge millions of people based on a label. Hey, Scott, I'll jump on what you said. Danny, let me throw this at you because you are a historical great guy, and I want you to knock this out of the park for Gray. My first question, number one, that's just number one. I don't get that.
Number one, I have my first question.
Yeah, all right, so now
Celebrate.
Is that rhetorical?
Yeah, no, it was just celebrate.
Should I have said it like this? My first question?
Sure.
All right, sorry, Gray, I'm picking. Was the discrepancy over taxation itself, or was it taxation without capital letters representation itself, Danny?
Gray, the answer to your question is twofold. It was, from a majority standpoint, it was about taxation itself. Britain had just fought the 7 Years' War, and they were trying to figure out how to fucking recoup some money. And because the British colonists were going to be the major benefactors of that war that was fought, Great Britain felt that they should help pay for it. All right, the French and Indian War was really, it was fought all over the world. Great Britain didn't want to fight the war. I won't go through all this again, but they didn't want to fight the war.
Can I ask you this? Are you
Yeah.
pretty much saying that the whole taxation without representation was a semantical word, a semantical way to say that so that they could kind of invoke, like a patriotic kind of response?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Here's what you gotta try to imagine in your head. It's like 1/3 of the populace wants to revolt against the king over these taxes. 1/3 of the populace. 2/3 of the populace were completely fine under British rule. Okay? Great Britain said, man, we just fought this big ass war. We're a superpower at this point, but we got to pay for it. Okay? And so they said, since you guys are going to be the benefactor of all this, we need your help, so we're going to levy some taxes to help pay for all the trade goods and all the things that you're going to benefit from that we just fought this war. We got to help pay for the war that we fought on your behalf. Okay? So the colonists were like, fuck no, you're not going to tax us. And Great Britain tried to do this several times, and each time they backed off when the colonists said, no, you're not going to tax us. No, you're not going to tax us. Finally, you had the Boston Tea Party. Finally, they said, well, we're going to put a tax on tea. And it was like a 1% tax, okay? And so the whole taxation without representation monologue was simply that they didn't feel like they had a voice in Parliament, okay? The tax that the Brits were trying to levy.
It was the stamp tax was the first major tax.
Yeah, but it got shot down. It was the tea tax that is the one that threw everything, was the final one, the straw that broke the camel's back, because Great Britain said, no, we're not backing off this. We are actually going to enforce this tax. And so the rebels, which you would call the colonists at this point, were like, fuck you, we're gonna revolt. And it actually caused a civil war with the country. And they paint the loyalists as the bad guys. And the loyalists were not the bad guys. These were great British. These were British colonies.
Now, it's not fair to say that the Americans were evil people. This is just how
But
barbaric
it's how
it was in their
it's
times.
how. Think of it this way. Think of it this way. Think of all the Trump supporters.
If there was an alt-right or an alt-left
Yeah.
movement against America, that would be our America
Yeah.
300, 400 years ago.
Yeah, but this was the same as a bunch of dudes getting together and storming a National Guard armory. Okay, that's what it would be like today.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the level it is. Over a 1%.
Did you ever see the Facebook meme where?
Let me explain this real quick, and I do want to answer that. Gray, what they were talking about with representation, they did have representation in the Parliament. They absolutely had. Benjamin Franklin was going back and forth. Thomas Jefferson, all those cats were going back and forth. They had representation in the Parliament. They may not have been getting the answers they liked, but they absolutely had representation. And so they came back, and it became a tagline. And a propaganda.
It was their slogan.
Yeah, it was propaganda, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so you had 2/3 of the populace that didn't want this war. And people look at the Brits as the bad guys. We would look at it as if some group stormed a National Guard armory right now and the army came in to stop them. We'd look at it as thank God for the army. So the loyalists, which are painted as bad people, were like, thank God the Brits are coming.
Grace says, thanks, Scott. At Danny, essentially they viewed it as disproportionate taxes relative to their contribution.
Which is total bullshit.
Hey, let me say this, though, real quick. Grace said my point about racism was a counterpoint. Your answer is a conveniently apologist answer for white guilt. No, it's not. I'm just trying to help educate poor white people that hate black people is what I'm trying to do. But I still love you, Gray. You always have good things to say on our show, but I've got to call you out on that because that's bullshit. I want to debunk one more myth.
Please.
Thanks for not wearing the microphone to go take a piss. You're welcome. I want to debunk one last myth. The other myth that's painted often, and Scott, I'll let you speak to this a little bit.
Yes.
One myth that's painted is that our original American colony were these devout Christians that wanted to create this really, really Christian country and this really Christian society. And I'm not bashing Christianity. I pray to Jesus Christ myself. I don't go to church. I don't know what people would put me in a box on as far as my religion. I consider myself, I aim to be Christ-like. But our founding fathers were deists. As a matter of fact, the doctrine that most of our founding fathers subscribed to, they would not be accepted in most Assemblies of God or Baptist churches. They were deists. They believed God was a God that put the world in motion and then stepped back. They didn't believe he was a personal God. They didn't believe that he personally answered prayers. They believed in science to an extent. They just believed essentially they were theists that believed in creative design. Right. So, and Scott, you can talk to it a little bit. I mean, a lot of people think because our Pledge of Allegiance and our money says in God we trust these days, they think that's because we come from this overly Christian nation. So speak to a little bit about where all that stuff came from, because that wasn't around when we first became a country. Well, because they were deists.
I'll say this, and Danny alluded to that last week, the whole concept of in God we trust being put on our money. That was actually not put on our money until after World War II, right, which is long after,
what's that,
obviously.
The 50s?
50s, 40s probably,
40,
in that era.
Because the was it World War I or World War II that pulled us out of the Great Depression? World War II pulled us out of the Great Depression,
right?
Which happened in the early 30s, right? So, 40s I think was when it went on our money, and then around the 50s is when it was in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
In the 50s is when the actual statement under God was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. And just kind of looking over things today, and this is kind of an opinion that I have about a lot of the political commentaries that we have in this day and age. Sarah Palin, I read a quote, and loosely paraphrasing, she said that if under God was good enough, and I don't know, she's now from deep South Alabama. If under God was good enough for the founding fathers. You don't have a good
Alaska accent?
Oh yeah, no, I don't.
Okay.
If I even attempted it, it would be like North Dakota or something like that. But
that would sound cool though.
I know. Okay, so if under God, no, I can't do it. It's Southern. If under God was good enough for our founding fathers, then I'm going to stand by the Pledge of Allegiance and defend it. You know, and that was Sarah Palin's comment, because she was educated like many people in America are today, and they never questioned anything. They just believed, because that was added to the Pledge of Allegiance in the 50s, that it was there from the whole time. It was there from the beginning. And a lot of what I read today, and hear me clearly, and Matt, I know that you feel the same way that I do. We're not anti-religion, anti-God in any stretch or imagination, but we want to kind of keep that in a separate phase, that America is not a nation of Christians. America is a nation of capitalism. You could say that about us. We're a nation of opportunism. We're a nation of a lot of things, but we're a
religious freedom.
Yeah.
Which at the time there wasn't as much of a Protestant Christian movement, maybe, and so we might look Christian in that, you know, the Catholic Church was corrupt as hell. I mean, there were some people that wanted to come here, Puritans and stuff that wanted to do it, but yeah, we weren't a Christian nation.
I mean, if you look at us today compared to the, you know, the Catholic, you know, era, absolutely, that was people going out, you know, conquering people. That was the Crusades. They were going and saying, well, if you don't believe exactly like we believe, then we're going to kill you. And then the people that we don't kill, well, you're going to have to believe the way we believe. But I mean, that's not what America was founded on. America wasn't founded on creating a society where people all of a sudden were all going to be Southern Baptist. You know, good grief, that wasn't even, you know, the denomination of the time. That evolved over time as well. But I will say this. I will say that there were people that said, hey, we do believe in God. And the way that they believed in God and the way that they talked about God was not in the same way that the Catholic Church talked about God. It was different. It was very Protestant. It was very different. And so there were, yes, some people that had different beliefs than the mainstream of, you know, the English church. But what they were saying was, hey, we think differently than they do. And we don't think, because right now we're being persecuted, and if you looked back to the 4,000 or 5,000 years before America was even an idea, you weren't allowed to have a different idea. You weren't allowed to have a different thought. So if anything, America
and prior to this, the Catholic Church had become a governing power to some extent that was at times stronger than the power of even the king of countries.
Absolutely.
And so there was a uniform religion that was dangerous to go against. So there were people wanting religious freedoms, but the idea that a bunch of Baptists and Pentecostals came over here and said, thank you, Jesus, we want this land for you, they didn't even believe in God in that way.
That's absolutely true. And so it is a thing where, if anything, what America was founded on, it was, you know, we believe differently than England believes about God. You know, we believe in the same God. We believe a lot of the same things. There are a lot of people that believe wacky things that we don't believe. But what we want to say above anything else is that we don't want to live in a country where the government tells us what to believe or how to believe it. And so, if anything, America was founded as a country that, you know, first and foremost, wasn't going to tell you what to believe. And now, and here's an opinion that I have. I don't think the founding fathers had any idea that we would still be a country 200 years later.
I don't think they thought we weren't, but they probably didn't know.
I mean, but I think this was all, oh my God, they were responding to current issues, and they were trying to get something started. But at that time, they were 13 colonies.
Well, they probably didn't have the foresight to understand that a few hundred years later, what kind of republic we would be.
Yeah, I mean, they were 13 separate colonies that had an idea that we could pull this off. You know, if you really think about, you know, what they
essentially,
were saying.
it was just, we think we're populated enough and we think we've got the right wealthy landowners that could create this situation where we could take this land from England.
Right.
And that was really the whole premise originally. And then, like I said, they wrote the Constitution, thanks to the High Dennis Janine. And, yeah, and I want to say this, man. I'm glad we talked about this subject because I don't think a lot of people know this, and I think some of the people tuning in might know this, but I would encourage them to share this podcast with their friends because there's a lot of people that need to know this. I'm not saying that people should be anti-church from a religious standpoint. I'm not saying people should be anti-patriotic from a federalistic standpoint. All I'm saying is, and Gray kind of said something along the lines of, I'm trying to find it. He basically said, are they living pieces of guidance, or here's what I would say. I just think people should know the truth. I think people should know I think up until recently, in the last 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 years, most governments have had this parent-child relationship that says we are smarter than the people, we know better than the people can't handle the truth, kind of like the whole Men in Black spiel, right? When Men in Black, where he's like, the person's a genius, but people are dumb and panicky and blah, blah, blah. I disagree. I think that people are adults and people should be able to hear the whole truth and make their mind up for themselves. And I think we are the greatest country in the world in a lot of ways. And I'm really blessed to be living into 2018 and to be living in America on top of that, despite all the other privilege, or amongst all the other privilege that you and I have and a lot of other Americans have. So I'm not saying anti-government anarchy, like all that. I do think we have to keep power of the people, and I think it takes being educated, and I think becoming an educated populace is a big part of that. But I'm not doing the anti-American spiel. I'm just saying people need to be educated. People need to know what they're talking about. The only other thing that we might want to get into, and I don't know if we got time, man. It's been 2 hours. It's been a long podcast. We've got 64 comments. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Danny, Scott, do we want to save this for another time, or do we want to jump into the Masonic Illuminati?
I'm not ready.
Beginnings to the founding father. Y'all want to hold that? Is that a whole other subject?
I am trying to get Gray in so we can kind of test our live interview, if you're okay with that.
You know what? I think we've... let's do this. Sit down, Danny. We'll all do a quick 2-minute wrap-up, and then, we'll try to bring Gray in. We're not going to necessarily call it an after show, but if it screws up everything, we'll cut it at the end of this. So let's kind of do a finishing thing. I kind of did mine, but I'm going to do it real quick just again. Guys, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't care if you're a Christian or an atheist. We're not trying to push anybody in any direction. We just feel like there's a lot of false education out there from media streams or schools or books or whatever you want to call it. And we just feel like people should be an educated populace. And we don't feel like we can make a difference in our country until everybody knows all the facts. So that's all we do. We try to get on here and be unbiased and just shoot straight from the hip. We're geeks. We like to research this stuff. We like to argue with each other. We antagonize each other. Gray, I appreciate you antagonizing us a little bit because I think it helps. I think it's healthy. I mean, and I think we also show that you can be gentleman about it. You can be classy about it. It's okay to disagree or agree, and we all have probably agreed and disagreed several times here today. But we're not trying to, we don't have any negative agenda, man. We just want people to get interested in some of this stuff because it really does make a difference in our world. And so we want to help educate people and hopefully help push the people of America and the citizens of the world forward by helping educate. So that's all I hope to do, man. I think our founding fathers did some really great things that we could really look up to and really learn from. I also think that you can't put anyone on a pedestal. If I learned anything in ministry school, it's that I don't give a crap if you're the Pope or the President or a priest or whatever. I don't put people on a pedestal. We're all human beings, right?
I put Jesus on a pedestal.
Shut up.
Do you put Jesus on a pedestal?
Yeah. You want to talk about this episode?
Right. No, I'm just saying. You just said you don't put, but I think we all know we should put Jesus on a pedestal.
Okay. Well, you're talking about God versus people.
Well, Jesus was people. And good Jesus was good people.
Can we save that for another time? Yes, I agree.
And Jesus was in the Illuminati.
I'll tell you what, go read the New Testament, and every time he talks about God the Father, the Holy Spirit, or Jesus Christ, just take those names out and replace it with unconditional love, and you'll read it in a whole different light.
Absolutely. But when
Shut
unconditional love says slaves obey your master, just skip over that part.
Because when Jesus came, they wanted him to be a political revolutionary. They wanted him to be a militant revolutionary. And
James and John, the sons of thunder.
And he said, you can be who you are right now and still have peace, love, and truth. And that's all he was trying to say with that. He was not condoning slavery. He was saying that whether you're a slave or you're a master, or whether you're a king, or whether you're a peasant, whatever you are, you can have truth, love, and peace, and it doesn't come from a military resistance. It doesn't come from a political resistance. It comes from within. It comes from inside. That's all he was saying. I'm not arguing with you, man. We'll talk about it later. Let's leave religion out of this one.
No, that was beautiful. I was going to say that was beautiful.
We're not going to be able to get Gray in on this one. He's having some issues on his end.
Danny fucked up Gray.
I didn't fuck up Gray. But no, man.
Danny's fault. Holy Spirit stopped it as soon as he heard that.
Well, we'll just change the word Holy Spirit and have unconditional love. Hey, I love everybody and all that stuff. That's the...
Guys, I thought this was...
Attack the idea, not the person, Danny. Why don't you have some nuts and be a real man?
Okay,
attack
the idea is some bullshit.
Okay, we can agree to disagree. Can we not get on the religious debate for once?
Guys, I want to say this.
I'm done.
This was a great time
You brought it up, motherfucker.
Listen.
Can we not get on some religious shit?
You did. I said I don't put people on a pedestal, and then you brought up Jesus.
And then you said you do
I
put
was talking about
Jesus
our
on a
founding
pedestal.
fathers,
I'm
man.
talking about real people.
I just discovered that I have had the ability the whole time just to cut the camera to me, and I could just talk all by myself. So
Thanks, Courtney.
I want to say
Great job.
this.
Dude, give us the camera back. Hey, I want to say real quick, a lot of people are going to see this, but I want everybody to know who our true family is. Courtney, Gray, I saw Vicky in here earlier.
Jackie.
I saw Amy Ross, Jackie Sullivan, Andrew Boyd. Man, there's Becky Pierce. I don't know if I named everybody. Jackson. I'm sorry if I didn't name everybody, but man, we really love you guys and appreciate you supporting our vision. Here's why. Can I just say this real quick?
Please
and I'm gonna hand it back off.
Please
here's
do.
why I think. Here's why I want to do this, and I think all three of us are on the same page. Here's why I want to do this. Like we said earlier, the news or the media is out for ratings. They're out for sales and advertisement. They are not for the people, okay? Right. The Republican and Democratic establishment, I'm not picking on them. If you vote Republican or Democrat, cool. You probably are just finding who you think your best candidate is. But they're out for the party's establishment and the party's best intentions, not the people. Right. There's a huge gap where there is a need for someone to listen to the people, help discuss all the tough subjects, no matter how politically incorrect they are, and address those in a transparent, unbiased way like we attempt to. So I really feel like even though we have a small following now, we're only a few episodes in, I really believe that we are filling a huge need that's going on in our country now. Nobody is listening to the people. Nobody's speaking up for the people. 80% of the people are not making the decisions for our country. Over 50% of the country is not a Republican or a Democrat, and they don't have a voice because we've been tricked into believing that you have to be Pepsi or Coke at election time, and that's it. As a matter of fact, I want to talk about this next time. Mark Cuban is thinking about running for president in 2020. He's thinking about running an independent, and I would love to see someone, whether it's Mark Cuban or someone else, I'd love to see someone run as an independent and
not be batshit crazy. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Abe Lincoln was an independent.
Yeah, batshit crazy.
Yeah, look what happened to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking free slavery.
They shot his ass.
A lot of people got shot.
I'm just saying.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been a great time together. I seriously commit to not drinking 5 beers during the next show because I think that affected me in a certain way.
Danny took it home.
Yes.
Vicky, Jackie,
Amy.
Love you guys, man. I appreciate you guys tuning in.
Thanks
Tell
for
your
tuning
friends,
in,
share
guys.
it. We really are just trying to fill a need for the American people, honest to God.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell people.
That's it.
What are y'all done? Man, I
We're
had
done.
that long ass closeout and y'all are just gonna be like deuces. Now
Deuces.
I look like the long-winded idiot.
Yeah.
Yelling
Turn the camera off. I got some shit to say about that Jesus comment.
I just don't want to
Here we
yelled
go.
at again.
Show's over.
I'm not gonna
Good show.
Let's hug it out on camera.
We'll see y'all next time. Hug it out. Hug it out. In the arms of the
I'm slightly weirded out touching Scott because he's done
far
his show shit.
away from you. the arms of the angel.
While we slowly fade to black.
Let me do the slow fade. Hang
Sing a
on.
damn good hymn for somebody that doesn't like Jesus. Damn
Hey, Jesus is always number one, and he is my co-pilot.
Hey, we're doing a
Takes
slow
the
fade to
wheel.
black. In the arms of the angel.
Is it still going?
Far away.
All right, we've got nobody's going to listen to that.
Six
That long.
seconds.
It was
Okay.
funny for like 6 seconds.